Okay. Good morning, everyone. We're about to begin. If you can take your seats. I'm Kristen Jade. I will be your moderator for this morning. I will be up front waving these cards at the speakers, and we're going to try to be as consistent as possible with these. So if you are a presenter and you see me wave this card, this is at your 10-minute mark. So you got a couple of minutes to wrap up your talk. And when you see this one, this is when the hook is going to come and pull you off the stage. Just kidding. They didn't give me a hook. So this morning, we'll go ahead and jump right in and get started with our first talk to Gridfinity and Beyond with Craig Brabant.
Good morning. People sometimes say we've saved the best for last, and I don't know what that says about my talk, the very first of this year's ECN meeting, but here we are. Also, my apologies if you're not into a ridiculously excessive use of animated transitions. I've been collecting insects for 25 years, but today's story really begins a couple of years ago when I set up a malaise trap in the Texas Hill Country for what I hope turns out to be a long-term biotic survey. This trap has been continuously catching insects for over 2.5 years, largely due to the efforts of my partner, Dr. April Sansom, and the occasional help of other willing field assistants. During the Hymenopterist Congress this summer, I talked about the nutilids I've collected so far from this place. I also shared images of some of the specimens from other families and orders that have come from this site. Today, however, I'll be talking about the process of sorting and storing malaise trap samples. In an ideal world, the workflow for processing trap samples would be something like this. We set up a trap, and then after some period of time, we go back and we pick up the sample. We bring that sample inside, and then everything gets pinned and labeled, ready to go into our collection. In the real world, however, this kind of thinking is naive because our typical workflow is different. Naturally, you pull out the velvet ants first, the other wasps, the beetles, the flies, and so on. So for each trap sample, you often end up with multiple vials of the good stuff and a larger jar or two holding the rest. And if you're like me, you will inevitably do this. And it's never this vial. It's always this vial that I end up knocking over. Andrew, is there? I didn't hear any sound, but no? Sorry. It'll be important later. So if I do the math, there's 2.5 years of continuous trapping with a target of changing the collection head every week. And that's roughly 130 trap samples at various stages of sorting to date. With multiple vials and jars for each, keeping dozens of malaise trap samples organized can feel overwhelming at times. And it is the first of 2 curatorial challenges that have been nagging me for quite some time. Organizing and storing our curated wet collection is another ongoing challenge. Most of our curated alcohol specimens are in 1-gram vials, and a large part of this collection is kept in these metal flat file cabinets. We've been gradually transitioning from storing vials in these styrofoam vial racks or vial trays to plexiglass vial racks as time and resources permit. The vial racks we use are modeled after this design, published nearly 50 years ago, and getting new vial racks made is a slow, labor-intensive process, at least at our institution. As some of you may recall, the topic of vial and jar storage routinely comes up on the ECN listserv. Last summer, Tommy McElrath shared the INHS design. Mike Farrow responded by sharing his design. And just this past June, there was another thread on the listserv where members lamented that this style of vial rack was no longer available. And it's a design clearly favored by some ECN members. These issues have been near the top of my priority list for much of the year, and that is, what is the best solution to store these 130 plus malaise samples, each at various stages of sorting? And can I find a better choice to the vial racks that we currently use in the collection? I spent a good amount of time over the the last 6 months or so looking for answers to these questions. And as often the case, the journey has been just as interesting, if not more so, than the destination. Yes, we are all taxonomists, and I mean our entire species. Almost all of us accumulate and organize stuff, sometimes for aesthetic reasons, sometimes for utilitarian reasons, oftentimes for both. And this innate urge to gather and organize stuff isn't even unique to Homo sapiens. So to find organizational and storage solutions, we can and should look beyond the entomological community. One of the first stops in my search brought me to YouTube, where I found this video by Zach Friedman. It's a strange, entertaining video that's been viewed almost 800,000 times, and it's worth checking out the full video. Here's a short clip to give you a sense of what to expect, and if there's no sound, you're going to be supremely disappointed.
Ladies, gentlemen, NBs, furry scalies, AIs, gelatinous hexahedra, reincarnated houseplants, and cyborgs.
So in the video, Zach describes a new modular storage system consisting of base plates or grids and storage bins. And both grids and bins are scalable to whatever size you need. The storage bins register with the base plates, allowing them to maintain their relative positions to each other. All of Zach's base plate and bin designs are freely available and modifiable. And there's an active Gridfinity community with many, many people designing and contributing 3D models of custom bins to store a variety of tools and parts. So I spent a few days printing and evaluating grids and bins, but ultimately decided none of them would suit my needs without modification. But it did lead me to realize if I learned how to use 3D modeling software, I could design solutions that were custom tailored to our specific collection needs. So the first few objects I made were fairly simple. They were just blocks or trays with sockets for vials or jars. But my early designs share the same fundamental flaw with nearly all other traditionally manufactured vial trays or racks. They are all rectangular containers made to hold and store cylindrical objects. These rectangular racks are not optimized for use in collections. They're not designed to minimize unused space nor minimize the material needed to make each rack. In other words, they often cost more and take up more collection space than solutions specifically designed to minimize cost and unused space. And as all of you well know, money and space are two of the most limiting resources in natural history collections. With the proliferation of 3D modeling software and low-cost plug-and-play 3D printers, we no longer have to be constrained by the limits of more traditional manufacturing and design. So this little epiphany made me think about storage from a different perspective and ask, what's the minimum amount of material necessary to hold vials in a fixed position? And as it turns out, not much. Designing and manufacturing are iterative processes. In-house 3D modeling and printing facilitates rapid prototyping and design improvement. And of course, in-house on-demand printing also means I can get additional racks in hours instead of days, weeks, or even months. After working on this proof of concept design, I moved on to bigger racks, and here are the current versions of my storage solutions. So this design was for storing malaise or other insect trap samples. It's printed in 2 pieces and then glued together. It can hold up to 9 1-dram vials around the outside and 1 1-ounce jar on the inside, 9 lesser rings and 1 larger ring to rule them all. Can even hold a collection event label. Here's my new vial rack design. 2 of these racks have nearly the same identical footprint as 1 plexiglass rack, but hold significantly more vials. There's a dedicated space for each vial, so when you take one out, you don't have to worry about neighboring vials falling over. They also tessellate perfectly, providing even greater capacity in our collection. And adding magnets to the rack was trivial, and since we have steel cabinets, there are advantages to having magnets. Some benefits are obvious, and some less so. So to summarize my talk to this point, I think you can move beyond traditional manufacturing for some equipment in our collections. Adding an inexpensive 3D printer to your collection means you are able to print supplies on demand And if you learn a bit of new software, you can design the perfect solution for your specific curatorial need. So yes, let's get rid of the box. Now I'd like to talk about designing and printing boxes. Boxes and blocks are easy to model and print, and we regularly use many things in our collections that are variations of these simple shapes. So now I'm going to show you a few of the other things that I've designed and printed over the last few months. We use rechargeable batteries for the flashes in our focus stacking rigs. I have hole punches in various diameters that now have a dedicated home. I prefer using a round dish for sorting malaise trap samples, so I made this one with a raised pattern on the bottom to reduce the insects sloshing around. I don't know if you can see that. Since I'm rarely able to sort a sample from start to finish in one go, I created a lid to reduce alcohol evaporation. We use recycled pins as guard pins and for holding header labels and trays. And a few years ago, we saw a pinning block design here at ECN, but it was just a copy of an existing metal pinning block. This is my design where I eliminated all unnecessary material from the design. We all use thousands of boxes to hold our pin specimens, and an open box is one of the easiest shapes to model and print. I'd be happy to discuss the pros and cons of 3D printed unit trays with you at some point, but it's also easy to make a tight-fitting lid so you can design insect mailers, customized for different purposes. Sorry, my presenter notes aren't presenting. I found this inexpensive bamboo organizing tray to put on my desk, and it holds all my curatorial tools and other things. But I like to have the stuff I use most often a little bit closer to me. So I designed this stand and I designed this curation station. And these actually are good candidates for the Gridfinity system because now I can add or subtract components as needed to whatever the task is at hand. Has this made me more efficient at pinning and curating specimens? No, not really. Has it eliminated the clutter on my desk? Also no. I would say it's kind of a reverse Marie Kondo. I add things that spark joy to my already cluttered workspace. We have a regular need to capture insect images in our collection. Holy cow, I only have a minute left. For high throughput image capture, I made this tray to hold a 4-inch specimen stage as well as a 2-inch stage underneath. By adding magnets, we can use 2 or more trays in our workflow to speed up the image capture process. And for quick image capture to share on social media, for example, I use a smaller tray. My early design held a 2-inch stage, but I found a gray filament that's almost a perfect match for neutral gray. And by printing the tray and the stage, I can now capture images with a gray, black, or white background. And as you've probably noticed, printer filaments come in a variety of colors, including translucent white. This means we can now design and print light diffusers in any shape, size, thickness, and color needed. So Star Trek meta replicators may still be a few years away, but there's software and hardware available now that can make collection work easier and faster. In 2019, I shared how I use Google Sheets to auto-generate QR codes and create sheets of catalog number labels. I also discussed how I use an inexpensive vinyl cutter with custom templates to automatically cut out header labels of various sizes. And this year I added 3D modeling software with a free academic license and a 3D printer to my curation toolbox. Most natural history collections continue to be understaffed and underfunded, so finding ways of doing the things we do faster, better, and for less money is more important than ever before. I hope for at least some of you, my talk has opened a figurative door to thinking about the possibilities of improving the way you curate. Thanks for listening. Tommy.
I noticed in the file racks you were using vials with little plastic snap caps. You evaluated those for long-term storage?
That is a whole nother discussion. And the reality is we have 1 million or so curated specimens with the 1 dram files, and it's an awful solution. But to hold them, I have these nice racks. Yeah, so that's a Bamboo Lab X1 Carbon. That's kind of at the higher end because it takes my stupid human decision making out, but they now are the lower end, which have the same quality prints, are the same cost as a color laser printer, so $300. I use Autodesk Fusion 360, which comes with a free academic license. Yeah, go ahead. I haven't yet shared the design, so Ainsley asked if she wanted to use one of my designs. As my favorite joke goes, we have a full-time staff of one, so designing and printing this stuff in-house was the first priority, but I am thinking about how I'm going to share this with the broader community. And I'll take Mike's question if we. I am so glad you asked. So I'm printing everything in PLA, which is polylactic acid, which is the cheap starch-based biodegradable filament that everybody uses when they 3D print. But you can get filaments in other materials like nylon or ABS plastic. And so you can get filament in materials that we already use in our collections. I think the jury's still out as to what the longevity is. Hopefully they wouldn't all fail on exactly the same day if you printed 10,000 of them. All right, thank you.
Okay, so our next presenter this morning is Laura Porturis with Specimen and Data Use at the Frost Entomological Museum.
Hi, my name is Laura and I'm the collection manager at the Frost Entomological Museum. And today I'm going to be sharing with you a process that we recently went through examining specimen and specimen data use of our research collection. So to start, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Frost, it's the insect collection of Penn State University, and we're located in central Pennsylvania. It was founded in 1969 by Dr. Casey Kim, who some of you maybe know, and I learned recently was also a founding member of ECN, and that the inaugural meeting of ECN was held at Penn State in 1989. We're a mid-sized university museum with about 1.3 million specimens in its care. Strengths include the Casey Kim Annapleura collection with about 15,000 slides, the George and Alice Beatty Odonata collection with about 65,000 specimens, the J.O. Pepper aphid collection with about 50,000 slides. And we've recently been increasing our representation of mid-Atlantic pollinators, and we have over 100,000 pin specimens of that group. Recent news and projects of the Frost include a 2021 NSF infrastructure grant that allowed us to increase our storage capacity by about 40% by expanding cabinetry and installing a compactor system. This funding also allowed us to pursue 2 rehousing and digitization projects, one focused on our slide-mounted aphids and another on our ethanol preserved aquatic insects. So at this point, we have addressed some 6,300 aquatic insects that were at highest risk of ethanol evaporation. And we have rehoused our entire J.O. Pepper aphid collection. The aphids are almost done being imaged, and we have begun the process of transcribing their label data. Another recent project that we've undertaken at the Frost is creating a 5-year strategic plan, and this was done with the input from our museums department committee. This was done with the intention of guiding some of our future activities so we can try to optimize the utility and potential of the collection and also be able to demonstrate the collection's value to our parent institutions and upper administration. So to move forward with that plan, one of the things we first needed to do is have a better understanding of how the collection's specimens and data are currently being used. To examine this, we primarily looked through our loan records and those correspondences, like pictured here, and determined what taxa were being requested, how many specimens were sent, what type of project the specimens were supporting, and what institution the requests were coming from. We did this with all the loan records we had on file from 1969 until present. And though not all of the records are present and not all of the records had all of the information we hoped they would, there was definitely enough there for us to get an idea of specimen use in our collection. So what did we learn? We learned that we make out on average 7.2 research specimen loans per year, average of 89 specimens per loan, or 641 specimens each year. This is a conservative measure. It does not include loans or specimen use that didn't have paperwork filed. And it does include the 8-ish year gap in our 54-year history in which the Frost didn't have a curator on staff. As far as the taxonomic distribution of specimens, the big 5 orders, so Coleoptera, Hemiptera, Diptera, Hymenoptera, and Lepidoptera, those were our most used, followed by Odonata and Cicodia. Odonata and Cicodia may be a little bit odd, but if you remember from earlier, they're 2 of our largest sub-collections and represent our taxonomic strengths. When we looked at the taxonomic distribution of specimen use through time, we saw a couple of things that were of note. The Laos and Hemiptera collections have been used much less in the past couple of decades than they had been previously. I think this is primarily because there are fewer Laos specialists and aphid specialists than there were, say, in the 80s or the 90s. Another thing that I thought was interesting, but it might be a little bit too soon to tell, is that it seems like there's been a recent uptick in the use of Hymenoptera. My guess for this is that because there's a lot of folks in our department who are part of Penn State's Center for Pollination Research, or Pollinator Research, those people have been requesting specimens from us. And so I think that these are a lot of internal loans. So moving on from taxonomic distribution to examining the research use or project type, maybe unsurprisingly, overall, the most common use of research specimens is for systematics and evolution research. One thing that I thought was genuinely surprising, though, is that since about 2015, the purpose of specimen use has diversified a little bit. So if you look at the edge, you can see people are using the Frost specimens for things like methods development, reference, extension education, for example, all of which specimens had not been used for prior to about a decade ago. If we now also include information that we have on specimen data use, so tallied by things like email data requests and GBIF citations, not only is there a huge increase in individual use cases, but as the proportion of systematics and evolution projects stays nearly the same, other fields like ecology, climate change, conservation, invasion science, and biodiversity science explodes. And this is great, or at least I think this is great. So when the argument inevitably arises that we don't actually need to keep specimens, we now have data that suggests otherwise. Both physical specimens and their digital data are both used and for different purposes. And I understand that GBIF citations need to be taken with a grain of salt, but I did read through the titles and scanned through the questionable papers to see whether it seemed likely that Frost data was used in those papers, and I tossed out about 16% of those citations. So I think this is a fairly reasonable representation of what is going on with our collection use. So the Frost has been digitizing its specimens since about 2013 and currently has 10 to 15%, or about 160,000 specimens in publicly searchable databases. As you can see, just 10 to 15% of the collection database has drastically improved the utility of our collection. In light blue is specimen use, and in dark green is specimen data use. We can also see a similar trend in increased research utility when examining the specimen and data requests or downloads, where they're coming from. So here you're just looking at the physical specimens. The yellow dots represent the location of institutions that are requesting loans. So 70% are national, 20% are international, and 10% are internal, so just Penn State requests. But when we also include specimen data, here the orange dots are representing countries that requests or downloads are coming from. And these proportions change to a greater international use. So overall 50%, 57% national, 36% international, and 6% internal. So what does this mean to us, and what implications does it have on the museum's future plans? I guess obviously prioritizing digitizing the collection, even if we don't have funding for it, if only 10 to 15% of the collection's data is available and it provides that level of increase of use, it's clearly providing a good bang for its buck in terms of input versus output. Also, with the increase in specimen use for things like conservation and climate change, identification reference, things like that, most of which don't have taxa-specific questions, makes sense for us to prioritize our collecting efforts in a general way, so general collecting instead of pursuing specific taxa. Vouchering specimens will also be important, especially from survey studies. So in our department, students aren't required to voucher their research specimens. And so if we know of a student who is doing biodiversity surveys, we need to make sure that we are actively pursuing their research specimens and making sure that they get vouchered. So how is this exercise helpful? Well, we now have something that illustrates the productivity of our institution to administration. This is on the forefront of our minds right now at the Frost. We recently had another collection in our college that was transferred to another university, and this happened quietly and it was gone before anybody really knew about it. And we want to make sure that doesn't happen again, and we want to make sure that Penn State values collections. And so pulling information together that can help illustrate that collections are useful and do contribute to research and education, when those collections have stewards, is something that's really important to us right now. So if there are other institutions that have similar unease, I recommend taking a closer look at your institution's data if you haven't already, because this felt enlightening to us. This is also helpful, obviously, for granting agencies and potential donors to provide them with some information about what they're investing in. So what's next on the agenda? The Frost not only has the research collection, but it has a pretty robust teaching collection with almost 400 insect families. It also has a small public space or public museum where we can share all sorts of things, ranging from a wall that's like about how cool insects are to things like interesting research that are going on in the department. And just this year, 11 classes and nearly 200 students that we know of visited the Frost to use either the public space or the teaching collection. 3 more courses that didn't visit the Frost loaned specimens for use in their class, and there were 13 other specimen loans from the teaching and outreach collection. In the public space, we're getting more than 300 visitors each month. And so all of those things are important and will help inform us on the educational utility of the museum rather than just the research utility. We need to figure out how far some of those records go back, what metrics to tally, et cetera, but that might be something that we share at a future ECN. And yeah, I would like to thank the super awesome folks at Frost who regularly contribute to making the collection better. The Penn State College of Ag and NSF and IMLS for various funding projects throughout the years. And if there are questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
There's 11 folks in the listed, but how many people actually are full-time with the museum?
Just me. Yeah, so these are affiliated faculty, grad students, undergrads, volunteers. Yeah.
So how did you, so first question, where were you getting the data on papers that weren't, that were specifically?
So that was downloaded the metrics data off of GBIF that cite specimen use in their papers, and emailed requests. So people that didn't necessarily need the physical specimens, but wanted information associated with their specimens.
Second question, how are you tracking all this now that you've gone through and like annotated all the loans, digitized, or pulled out all that useful information? Where are you tracking the references you found or
So far, it's in a spreadsheet for this talk. I haven't figured out exactly how we'll keep it moving forward. Haven't thought that far, if I'm being perfectly honest. But it would be perfect and great to continue like adding to it every year. Yeah. All right, thanks, guys.
All right, our next talk is compactorizing the CUIC, expanding collections in a static footprint. And our speaker is Jackie Wisman.
All right, thank you so much for having me here. It is wonderful to see so many familiar faces and meet new ones, of course. My favorite conference of the year. I'm Jackie Wisnant, coming from the Cornell University Insect Collection, where we just finished compactorizing the north section of the collection. Pretty crazy. I don't have to tell you guys that space is of a premium, as Craig said. We need to always be paying attention to how we can best fit more bugs into the spaces that we have. But to tell you that story of this particular move, I want to pull back and look at the evolution of the collection, because history is fun. So looking at the start of the Cornell University Insect Collection, it began back in 1872 with Cornell, the chimes master at the time, moving the collection into a space that he occupied in McGraw Hall, in a space 300 square feet, a little bit bigger, or a little bit smaller than my current apartment. And looking through some of these older documents, I was like, what is this massive expansion of space that we're seeing here? 1906, 1,200 square feet. The current collection is maybe 10,000 or 12,000 square feet. What's going on here? And it says in Comstock Hall, 30,000 square feet. What's happening? I wish. But what that is that's actually space for the entire department. So in Comstock South, which is when it was removed in 1934, it's currently about, not currently, about a little bit less than 6,000 square feet, and then expanded in 1984, when it moved from the fourth floor of Comstock Hall down to the second floor, with an NSF grant that Quentin Wheeler and Jim Leaper submitted, which I believe is probably the reason that NSF grants now have page limits. This thing is a brick. It's very comprehensive, but I tell you what. So it proposed compactorizing the entire collection on the second floor of Comstock Hall. There's so many really, I love some of the old records here, including Jim's beautiful drawing of a customized box to hold exactly 6 drawers for the temporary storage of these materials as the collection was being moved. But there's like exhaustive records on what is going where, what exactly is going to be in each box, who all we are going to hire to make this happen. And it's just, yeah, just delightful digging through some of this, what they had to deal with, and what we still have to deal with when trying to make these moves happen. For that particular move, 363 cabinets had to be moved 2 floors. During that time, 2,000 boxes of drawers were squirreled away around the entire building. I was filling up people's offices, it was through the hallways. You do what you got to do, as long as you know where everything is, you can put it back. And a part of this collection was also converting the alcohols from hanging vials in these really precarious situations to vials in jar storage, which is where they are right now. And as always, this one made me smile because in this summer we had a pretty significant delay of the project that we were working on, and that happens all the time. So this record of like, by the way, we're not actually gonna be able to start yet. What is it? Revise the scheduled moving date. Always love to hear that. And then we got these rare photographs of in progress installation of these compactors. It's really, really something cool to see, especially when you're working in this space. But as it currently stands, the south room of the Cornell collection is kind of looking down here. It contains 4 banks of moving or compacted shelving squeezed into this space, trying to be exactly as space efficient as you possibly can. How many things can we fit into this space while still being able to move around? And then about 10, 15 years ago, there was an expansion to the North Collection space, or expansion to create a North Collection space out of the Comstock Memorial Library. So all of the books in this fairly extensive library collection were moved to the 2nd floor of the Mann Library on campus, which still is the entomological library, very cool. And the compactor rails that were already existing there were covered with carpet, and new cabinets were moved in, again, about 10 years ago, 10, 15, I don't know. And the important thing here is that this 2nd floor of Comstock Hall, when the building was built, even before the 80s, it was Quentin Wheeler can be given credit for this, to convince the contractors to pour the entire floor of this section of the collection and the library extra thick, because he knew we might get expanders, we might get compactors at some point. And he made the argument that, oh yes, the library may expand. Those heavy, heavy books need heavy, heavy floors. And that was a little bit easier to convince contractors of that, rather than say, but my bugs, they need space. So this summer, which is part of what I was brought into the collection to help work with, which I'm very grateful for, was compactorizing that North Collection space, which is currently, at the time, it was the Hymenoptera room. It will probably still be called that for the next 10 years, even though everything else has moved in there. So what this particular NSF grant submitted by Moreau, Grady, and Dombrowski, it added 96 new cabinets and 800 new drawers, which is unfathomable to me. When the drawers came, they filled the entire south room walking space, which is just wild. We unpacked them and branded them so that drawers would fit, the lids would go back where they were supposed to go theoretically. And it was just absolutely surreal walking around for probably a good 6 weeks, squeezing around these massive piles and piles of beautiful new drawers. And there's always a risk, right? When you get a whole bunch of new things, you're like, are they all going to be good? And maybe there's different experiences with these particular drawers. There's been mixed reviews in the far past, but of these 800 drawers, only 5 or 6 had either minor little issues with like the lid or curved bottoms. But 5, 6 out of 800, I feel like that's pretty good. So we were really happy with that particular part of the process. We couldn't actually start moving anything until classes ended because of utility of the collection, utility of the classroom space that we were primed to take over. And I suppose students have to learn somewhere, I guess. So as soon, like the minute the last entomology class kicked out of the room, we started moving drawers in, and they were wrapped in double ply gallon bags, whatever, how many gallons, 30 some gallon bags, and taped to try and seal things, because we knew they were going to be sitting for a period of 6 to 8 weeks, potentially longer if there were delays. And this was just filling the space. Everything is sealed, labeled, ready to go, but ready to wait. I will say, definitely, if you're moving anything from the same floor, if you're on the same floor, these are absolutely the most valuable player. These rolling half cabinets are great for both taking materials out for demonstrations or classes so that you can all have them in one spot. But man, moving a collection with wheels, there's 5 12 slot mounted rolling half cabinets, and then this weird double one, which has a wheel that needs some work. It really made the process a lot easier, especially when we're coordinating multiple teams. We can say this, put this cabinet here, and keep it all moving smoothly. The old lane cabinets that filled up part of the space were moved out. We sent 11 out to the Southwest Research Station to establish their a new kind of housing unit for their entomology collection. Folks from all around got, they just tried to, again, move these and make them as efficient as possible. At first we were using dollies. This was really hard because these are really heavy. And so we could do maybe a couple at a time and then take a break or whatever. And then we realized if you put them on their side, 2 normal people can move these very easily, or of average strength. And that made the rest of the process go a lot faster. So use tools that work best for your process. And these are showing places where we were able to squeeze in more cabinets from the old collection space, finding like, okay, there's enough space beside this column, maybe we can line them up along the freezer or whatever, packing them into the tech offices, just trying to get as much utility space as possible. And now they're empty, which starts, compactors are nothing new for you folks. You've seen many, many amazing compactor projects, but this is the first one I'd personally seen, and it was so crazy cool. So they did build a false floor to hold the new rails. Unfortunately, the old rails of the library system, which we were hoping that they could use, did not quite fit the new system. And it would be prohibitively expensive, or at least more expensive than we wanted to pay, to mine out or drill down and seat the rails within the concrete floor. I mean, that would be ideal. I would really have liked that, but that's, you can roll with what you got. So loading up the compactors, just, man, magical. Ta-da! And I do want to say a huge thank you to the folks who are with us for good 5-6 weeks. Cody, Colby, John, and Dakota, just really cool, really nice folks, did a lot of work in making this a reality, and yeah, bravo. And then maybe a week after they left, there was a rainstorm. Like, no, oh, come on. That's, yeah. So, and that was taken care of. It was just, structural things in an old building is wonderful, always. And there were a couple of things. If you're getting space saver cabinets, look out for, just make sure that the holders are seated. And so if you do have some that are not quite down in their slots, then before the cabinets got painted, you have to bring them down with a board. Don't bang on those little rail things, because then they will never fit a drawer ever again. So put a nice board, whack it down, and then do repaint, because that's exposing raw metal. You don't want that to be potentially exposed to the elements. This was not a problem. This is one thing that I love about the new compactors, is that the doors will open flush. Man, because in the old compactors, they are seated in these carriages that enclose the very ends of them, and the very end cabinets cannot open. So when you're trying to pull a drawer out, you kind of get clotheslined. It's just great. But the one thing that I do say about Space Saver, I love the doors open independently. It's great. But there is a double ridge just inside the door. So if you're not pulling a drawer out perfectly flush, it will catch a little bit. So you just have to put stickers on each of the doors saying, careful pulling out your drawers, people. So that is something that I really wish that double edge wasn't there. That's something to consider when you're looking at your own collections and expanding those. But with that, thank you so much for hearing about this project. The folks who are involved with the project are just absolutely incredible, and I don't think I have time for questions, but thank you. I have 2 minutes for questions. Yes.
What's your source on the moving cabinets?
Oh, the moving cabinets? I think they're just laying half cabinets, but they've been mounted on a piece of plywood and 4 wheels from the hardware store. It's, yeah, fantastic. We didn't make them, they were already there. But yes. All right.
Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Brittany Hahn. She will be talking about the behind the exhibit Journey from Collections to the Gilder Center Insect Library.
All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me to hear about the work of my colleagues and I on the latest addition to the American Museum of Natural History. So said edition is the Richard Gilder Center for Science, Education, and Innovation, specifically our insectarium. So this insectarium contains about 742 of our preserved insect specimens from our research collections, which also includes 6 insect nests. And aside from those specimens, we also have an array of live insect exhibits to show people. Of course, the purpose of this insectarium is to basically showcase the systematics, biodiversity, and ecology of various types of insects, as well as present a holistic view of their relationships between them and us humans in society. And invertebrate zoology, of course, put lots of effort into putting this exhibit together, both in contributing the specimens, working hard to manage their data, as well as input a lot of the educational material. But I wanted to take this presentation to basically highlight that this was not just invertebrate zoology, but a huge interdepartmental, interdisciplinary effort from across the museum. And so basically, where does insect collections management fall into this big web of people? It certainly, we certainly didn't work in a vacuum. This is a list of all of the major departments across the museum that we worked very closely with. And these people all came from a variety of backgrounds and expertise and perspectives on how things should get done in this process of putting the exhibit together. And as you might imagine, there was some conflict, not necessarily conflict, but some people were kind of arguing as to the best way to get things done. And the basic remedy to this was really just simply lots of compromise and communication between all of these people. And even within invertebrate zoology, with who I worked most closely with, we were essentially still working with several different teams, because even though we had one insect collection, we had several different curators and their museum specialists who were, of course, all working to achieve the same goal of cataloging everything properly before going out on exhibit, but they all did things slightly differently and at slightly different times. And this was helpful to me as the specimen preparator for the exhibit, because this gave me time to be constantly working on some group of insects while others were away being digitized or cataloged. And we basically decided how things were going to go on exhibit. This was largely a discussion between the curators and museum specialists, as well as exhibitions who had beforehand collaborated largely with education and administration. And of course, we all wanted to achieve the educational goals of the exhibit, but we were still approaching choosing specimens from different perspectives. So for exhibitions, they were, of course, looking for really charismatic insect specimens to pull people in and also just help them help fascinate people with insects in general. And of course, they were looking to see whether the specimens would fit in our exhibit cases. We had a cap of 70 basically for each of our oval cases that you can see a picture of sort of on that large photo. But of course, for insects like Phasmatodea, they're really big, so we could only fit several in there. They were basically just working really hard to make sure that all of the graphic design was all nicely laid out. And from the curation perspective, which is us, we were looking basically to see how much data each specimen held and what we were going to do with it after they were put on exhibit and during the process of putting them on exhibit, as well as whether or not these specimens came from a large series. So we tried to pick insects that came from really large series, so inevitably somewhere along the road, these specimens will degrade on display and we have to replace them eventually. And to do that with the least amount of paperwork, we had to choose things that all came from the same data set, that all came from the same accession number. And this is just a simple linear layout of our basic process. Exhibitions, once we chose the specimens and took photos of them to scale, they created these really great graphics that we were following throughout the entire process. So these graphic layouts, I would prepare specimens if necessary, they would get cataloged, digitized somewhere along the line, and then I would combine all of the specimens with the exhibition materials to eventually create these really nice exhibits that are all lit up really nicely, as you can see here. And this is just a general view of the insectarium itself. We have three basic main exhibits of our pinned specimens. So first off, we have Meet the Insects, or MTI. This is just 8 panels of the 8 largest insect orders, and it's just presenting basic taxonomic and morphological diversity there. We have North Wall, which is more of an ecology showcase, so a variety of different insects showcasing things like mimicry or camouflage, as well as the Tree of Life, which is just evolutionary relationships between insects. These are all just individual representatives of each order on a Tree of Life. And all of these specimens were mounted on this very, very dense foam called ethofoam, which is basically just so that it further inhibits vibrations from people running around the exhibit and hopefully not colliding into them, but obviously you never know. And a quick run through of our specimens. This is just a graphical representation of the representation of each order that we have. And the specimens themselves presented super interesting and fun challenges to overcome because they were just so variable in a lot of their characteristics. So they were all ranging from relatively fresh to about a century old. They were around a couple millimeters to almost the length of like my forearm. They were, of course, all pinned, slide mounted, fossilized nests. And all of this came into play when I was considering whether or not I should.
Griffin, enough.
Oh, I hope that wasn't talking to me. But yeah, and this all came into play when I had to decide whether or not to prepare them, or how about I should go about preparing them. And so right, so the important fun part. So of course, invertebrate zoology basically understood the risks of putting historical research specimens out on display. They are going to be in a public, well-lit area, which is basically the exact opposite of what we want as collections managers. So they did accept the risk, considering the great educational benefit this would hopefully do to people who visit the exhibit. And so keeping this in mind, this is why invertebrate zoology agreed with the exhibitions department bringing me on as a specimen preparator, because as you know, museum specimens are often not really like that great looking. And so I was just basically tasked to make them look a little more symmetric and lifelike. And basically what I did, it was pretty standard compared to even just a fresh specimen. I often used regular humidity chambers, but I did have to resort to some active relaxation over like some simmering water, as well as applying 50% ammonia to the joints of more stubborn specimens. And during this process, of course, it was super important to keep in mind, you have to keep data associated with your specimens at all times, frequently consult the layout that exhibitions gave me. So I made sure I wasn't like violating the spatial constraints of the panels. And basic lab safety, don't wear anything that would potentially like collide with your specimens while you're working. I always wear a watch on my right hand, but I take it off when working with them because this thing always comes loose and might hit something. And while I was preparing specimens, I ended up working in a surprising amount of environments. I started working in the compactor, but that was ended up being a little too inconvenient, having to move specimens constantly between the humidity chambers and the compactor itself. So I eventually moved to the office in which the humidity chambers were located, which also had museum grade cabinets so I could store them overnight while they were drying. I also had to work frequently in the histology lab for specimens that needed ammonia because I needed a fume hood to work with that. Ammonia smells really bad, as I found out. And of course, before I move on to the freezer, I also had to work in a sponge collection room because as I had to mount the specimens onto the exhibit panels myself. Exhibitions actually wanted me to work in their department, but the logistics of moving all of the specimens over there and then eventually back to the compactor or the exhibit hall would have been way too much logistically speaking. And they also had no museum grade storage to put the insects in. And the sponge collection fortunately presented a great amount of space for us to put these huge panels in. And as you can see, the ceiling was like super low. It was a very small room. And the first time exhibitions came to visit me in this room, they were like, oh my God, it looks like a cave in here. So that made me feel really great about what I was doing. And of course, because we had to move the specimens around so much, we had to eventually freeze everything. And I will talk more about that soon. But here's where we get to the important collections management part. So the museum specialists I worked with did a really great job of consolidating all of the data and making sure it was moving through the proper channel so that we could all keep track of it with the specimens getting moved around. And of course, just making sure registrar had the proper information before we put things on exhibit. So the basic pipeline was just they accessioned things if they weren't already accessioned, then cataloged by associating a barcode with them, and then digitized and logged into EMU. And the way that we recorded these in writing as going out on exhibit was we literally just sent a loan out to ourselves. And these are examples of the loan forms here. And these are, of course, are not just great records of them going out on exhibit, but this was great to use for the specialists themselves and me to keep track of all of the specimens as I was moving them around and such. And just a note, so I mentioned before that some of their specimens were actually fresh. They were either collected or purchased. And an example of this is my co-author Ruth's daughter, Tilda, who has collected a spotted lanternfly off the sidewalk in Brooklyn, as well as some scale insects another museum specialist, Aga, collected from her potted plants. And this is just an example of digitization. Of course, all of the important information is there: specimens, labels, scale bar. One picture has a tag for the Gilder Center, but in EMU, they are all tagged digitally that they were used for the Gilder Center or for the insectarium in general. And this is an example of some of my prep work and how I associated with the data. So as you can see on the left with like Orthoptera, I just kept the labels with them because the specialist I was working with was okay with that. But then for things like Hymenoptera or Diptera, I had to use disposable labels, one with the labels themselves so I could keep them away, and one with the specimens themselves. So they each present different pros and cons of saying like, oh, the labels here are going to be safe, or they're going to be a bit more at risk of disassociation, but they're still going to be kept away from the specimen prep process. Transporting specimens was also super standard. I would just carry them in drawers by hand while I was preparing them. But when we had to move things to the exhibit hall, eventually we used pneumatic carts, my best friend. So yeah, and then we also had to get these cardboard boxes especially outfitted with wooden bottoms by exhibition. So that was great on their part. And we of course transported these for exhibit before visitor hours when possible. Here's an example of installation. So long story, but we have actually had to drill holes sort of into the back of some of these panels. And the Ethophone does a really great job of not letting those vibrations destroy the specimens because he was power drilling 4 holes into the back of his panel and the specimens weren't moved whatsoever. He's been putting it into the back of a panel. And then this is one of the MTI panels getting installed. You can't quite see it, but there's like holes sticking out to help line up these screws sticking out in the back of the panel into the exhibit case. It was a really ingenious idea, actually. And of course, conservation was an active process throughout all of this, even since the inception of the project itself, and it's continuing as the exhibit is going on. There's condition reporting done on all of the specimens beforehand. Technical photographs and written reports for every individual specimen were taken. The exhibit cases themselves are all airtight, interchangeable besides that, and most of them contain this type of data logger and silica gel. But in the environment itself, there are also plenty of data loggers in case the ones without data loggers, something, God forbid, goes wrong in them. And of course, there's active monitoring and consultation going on at all times. Conservation worked closely with HVAC to see how they were getting installed and also the potential for environmental damage and pests. There were, of course, some obstacles in any project this large. So basically what ended up happening is that IZ was pushing for freezing to happen the entire process, but unfortunately it didn't happen until after I had put every single of the 735 insects that we had into the panels. And they were like, okay, we have to freeze everything. But that meant I had to take everything back out into drawers and then freeze the panels, hence me crouching in the corner in defeat over there. Plan ahead and save your museum's staff time. That's what I'm saying. And we didn't use pesticide because we didn't understand how it might interact with specimens and the exhibition materials, of course. And luckily, this slide is super short. Of course, as I stated, environmental monitoring is going on at all times. We unfortunately had one incident when Exhibitions was repairing a panel and they dropped it and a couple specimens broke. But the good thing about this is that that first butterfly over there, we had to order them and we had extra, so I was able to pin another one. And then that Burnet moth on the right, we also got it from a huge series. So we were able to get another one of that quickly, and it was fixed within the week. Takeaways and future directions. As I said, communication is really key in order to save a lot of time and just plan out logistics so we can save ourselves all headaches in different departments. And communication is especially important because there's a lot of things that are super obvious to us as collections managers, and especially in other people's departments that they need to emphasize, but because they're inherent to us and not to others, we should still communicate them out loud anyway, no matter how obvious it might seem. Specimens, of course, should be chosen and modified ahead of time just to keep the risks of exhibition in mind. And what we would like to have done is incorporate collections accessibility into the exhibit more, i.e. like putting a QR code so that they can so visitors can access our virtual collections more easily from the exhibit itself. And with that, thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.
So in our best effort to keep us on track, we don't have time for questions, so you can find Brittany during the break. Next, we will be hearing about the World Ichneumonidae Database from Davide Belco.
Hello, everyone. Well, it's finally nice to be here. Last year, I was stuck in Florida because of the hurricane. Today, I'm going to present something different. It's not collection-based, but it's going to be informing the collections. And I'm presenting with Filippo Di Giovanni, which is a friend based at University of Siena, and is my actual person that I go to cry about when I'm not able to do the World Ichneumonidae database. I'm a PhD candidate at University of Central Florida, and this is a sort of side project. Why Ichneumonidae? Sorry about this. Well, first of all, why we need to care about Ichneumonidae? Well, we have 41 subfamilies, of course. We have more than 25,000 species, so huge diversity over there. And they are ecologically important. They're all parasitoids, so high trophic level. They have a worldwide distribution, so they can be found everywhere. They have a huge diversity of life history strategies, so they attack different hosts. And also they have beautiful and diverse morphologies. So you need something at least to keep track of all these names to be able then to inform biodiversity. To do that, historically, we have ECN Horstman, 1997, which came into 2-volume, 2 people. It's a huge catalog, more than 1,500 pages, more than 25,000 valid names, so only Ichneumonids here, 10,000 synonyms, only type information. There are no biological information and no regional distribution. So there was just a bare bone catalog. After this ECN Horstman in 1997, the catalog expanded a little bit into what for many, many years we used, and it was called Taxapad. 2005, it came in a CD-ROM that you purchased for $200 something. Then it moved to an update in 2012. Of course, you need to pay each time, all right? And then the last one was the 2016 that came into a USB drive, all right? So you purchase the USB drive, and this is what you can open up in your computer. So this was done entirely by DKU, which was the first author, and it contained the entire Ichneumonidae, so Braconids plus Ichneumonids, 52,000 valid names, more than 16,000 synonyms. There is biology information, distribution, taxonomy, and nomenclature. So you can actually tap on those windows and you have all this information. You can download some data, you can download references, of course. But also, you have also, for those who are not willing to pay, of course, you have also an online public page that you could use, but you could not download anything. No references, no PDFs, of course. So kind of not ideal. After 2016, DKU retired. We don't have any update. So it is 8 years without Taxapad. And for the entire Ichneumonidae community, this was a big loss, especially because we are substantially describing roughly 200 new species a year, something less, sometimes more, some other years. So substantially, we're feeling completely lost. And so what are our challenges as a community? Well, first of all, oh, come on. We have 41 subfamilies, of course, you already see these numbers, 25, more than 1,600 genera. So you got names also at the generic level. Then you got name at species level, 25,000. Then you have more than 1,400 subspecies named. And then you have more than 10,000 synonyms. So how do you handle this? And this is based just on U et al. 2016. Now we have more species, 8 years on new species. So how can you handle this? How can people not lose citations over the years? Well, the biggest challenge is that we have too many names, too few people. There are roughly 20 to 30 researchers. This is not something that I just count them, all right, on publication. However, these 20, 30 researchers, not all of them are interested in taxonomy. So not all of them are interested in name and databasing. I would say that we are roughly 10 people in the entire world working on taxonomy. And most of them have an European focus, which is great, but it means that all those people are interested in Western Palearctic ichneumonids, known worldwide distribution. And there are more than 14,000 references that all of these people need to handle at any given time. So how can we handle all those names? So what is needed for the community? We need to keep track of names, of course, the changes in the names. We need to connect the infos of those names to biological association, to distribution, for instance. We need, therefore, an updatable resource that does not depend on published version, but it can be used freely. We need the repository for type images and many other bibliographic references. And then, of course, we need something that is not dependable on resources or one individual efforts, because when DKU left, we were left with nothing. And let's assume that all the ichneumoniid people die in a bombing somewhere, at least we have an updatable resources that can transfer. So this is why I started the project 1 year ago alone, working with these fantastic group of people, the species file group in TaxonWorks. And those are just few of the people over there. It's done by many more. Why TaxonWorks? Well, it's an open source database. The structure is sort of pre-built, so you are able to attach the OTU, so all the information to the actual name very easily. You don't need to worry about coding. Allows one-time commitment. So you input all the names one time, and then you just update the new information that are coming in. It is also a research space, so people can use that to explore some other avenues. Metrics, for instance, does not depend on funding except for the development of the platform, so you can use it freely. You don't have to pay for it. And then, of course, it is a collaborative environment, and we need a collaborative environment if we want to proceed on biodiversity research. So how we can handle those? So we have now the platform, but how can we input efficiently the names into TaxonWorks and all the other information? Well, I came up with this sort of modular approach together with Filippo, and we asked the curator to include, first of all, the names and the original combination. After this, please include all the subsequent citation and synonym combinations. This one will already give us a sort of minimal working unit that we can use right away, and also researcher can use, download the names, understand what are all these names and what are the references referencing to those names, of course. Then we can input the asserted distribution. Some of us, me, do all of this together. After that, please include the type information, and then biological association, which will be done last in a sort of second, third wave. And then images of the type, whenever we have them, just upload them. And this is what we got 1 year later. Names. We have right now more than 3,300 names. Not all valid, as you can see. The bluish one are the valid one. The slightly gray that you see over there are the one invalid, that could be unavailable or invalid fully. So we got a lot of invalid names or unavailable, all right? But you can say, well, out of 25,000 is just 10%. Yes, of course. But if you break it down by subfamily, you could see that they're almost all located in one single subfamily. Why? Because I did it. So more than 2,300 names over there. And for that subfamily, at least we have the entire Afrotropical species done. And I'll show you what it means with done, all right? But also, it's also true that we have 3 subfamilies that are completed. Very small one, the one that you see over there, Adeloniatine, then we got Agriotipine, and then we have the Ateleutine. Those are completely done. It means that you can go and browse all the valid and invalid species. Names, sorry. And then we have also another collaborator in France that is now updating the Anomalo 9 for West Palearctic. So we allow a huge amount of freedom for the curators, and this allows us to at least have some names that we can show to people. So I would say that after 1 year, it's pretty good. It's not bad. So when I say that we have all those names, at least in the subfamily Pneumonine, what do I mean? Well, we have all the taxonomic history, all the synonyms, all right, and this is important, but we also have the entire citation history. And right now in the entire taxon, we have more than 11,000 citations, which means you have the name associated to a reference multiple times. And for that reference, you have the page number where you can see that name, and you also have some information that you can look into if you're interested more in a catalog or a key, all right? So it's very easy to browse right now, not difficult as it was in Taxipad. Of course, we also have an update on the references. We now have more than 1,485 references, which means you can go into TaxonWorks, download the PDF, also rare books, and you're able to work on Ichneumonid. More recently, we developed also our public page via the new software from the Species File Group, which is Taxon Pages. And this will be available for everyone. Right now it's under the radar, right? But essentially you can browse for name, you can see the images, you have the entire taxonomic history, you have the synonymic history, and you have the distribution. This is new. Of course, it's not complete, but it's something that we are working on. What about the community? I couldn't do it without my community, of course. So the community at the beginning was really interesting. That was the community in the World Economic Database, okay? Just me, just this Italian crazy guy trying to change the world. Then we have these 4 people believing in the project. And then right now, I think we can say that we are global. And those are all the people, all the dots are all the people that are now collaborating with us. As you can see, there are many, many dots. Those are all their names. Some of them actually contribute actively. Some others just send us their new publication. Some others looking for us for publication. My friend Carl, for instance, is giving me some good publication from Bulgaria, for instance. Some other, like for instance, Gavin is emotionally supporting us. He doesn't have time for this. But at least we have a group of people that are revolving around the database. And this is, for us, extremely important. So what are the conclusions after 1 year? Well, of course, we need more names and more references. We're not done. We need more indirect collaboration, and this is something that we are trying and striving for. Please send us your PDF whenever you're done, because we cannot know what new information are available out there, and we cannot scout forever Google Scholar or a SearchGate for that. So if you can send us your images of type or whatever, please do that. And we are working with Gavin exactly to have at least the type images of all the Ichneumonid in the Natural History Museum in London. We need to develop a data paper that could be given credits to the people, the curator within the World Ichneumonid database. This is extremely important. And then, of course, we need more community and more curators, more involvement, and also more people that would like to contribute. Right now, we have 2 more people after a recent presentation that are willing to work. They are working on Ichneumonid, or they have free time, of course. And then we need to understand that a database, whatever it is, it's always and will always be a work in progress. So a lot of people can push back, say, well, when it's going to be finished? we don't care that much, right? It's never an end product, luckily. And this is what we need to internalize. I learned this word recently. And with this one, I want to thank everyone, the Species File Group, of course, for developing the TaxonWorks community and the TaxonWorks software, my PI that allows me to do this in my free time, the entire Ichneumonic community, and the entire curators of the World Ichneumonic database, and of course, potential future users and consumers of the World Ichneumonic database. As you can see, we got a new logo up there, and we got a fantastic male genitalia. If you want to see and know more about that, I'm going to give a talk at ESA for that. All right. Thank you. I'm going to take any questions. Okay. Yes, please.
This is wonderful, congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
But I have a question for you, which is, how do you do something that we all face? And that is, it's not complete, it will never be complete, and some families are not in the best shape. How do you indicate, so for a newbie who comes in and goes, I want to work on this subfamily, I have this great database, this is what's done. How do you indicate caution that it's not complete? How do you put that in?
This is a great question, and it is something that we are struggling with. The good part is that we are working on Ichneumonic community, right? So the community is pretty tight, so we know what's going on at each given time, all right? The fact that when we will, so right now, TaxonWorks is not accessible to people outside of the database. So it's not a public still. Wherever we will announce it publicly, we will say, these are the subfamily that are complete, and we're gonna possibly do some sort of updates through social networks. But yes, that's something that we need to think very carefully. I think that in our website, we will put something about these are not complete. Please do not trust the entire taxonomic history. You have to think about that U et al. Is still used though. The 2016 is still used, and it's not complete because we're missing the new. So we are in the same position, I would say. With U et al, you are slightly better historically, but moving forward, no, Filippo lost a few citations. He described a few new species, and they've never been cited in recent catalogs. So it's a huge amount of efforts and a huge amount of problems that we're dealing with. But yes, if you have some ideas, please share with us. Right. Yes. D, sorry?
Are you planning on incorporating your taxonomy?
The Utah? Oh yeah, we're doing that. We are working. So you can import all the information into TaxonWorks if you want, but the problem with you et al is that it's copyrighted. So we have that issues going on. It takes a lot of time to code it. So by the time that we possibly finish the World Ichneumonic database, maybe we can import you et al, but at the same time we finished it already. And it's very fun, including names, so it, Thank you, sorry.
All right, everybody, we're going to try to keep it to a 5-minute break so we can be on time for the virtual meeting. There's plenty of seats up front. I would like to ask folks who are sitting up front if you can either scoot in a little bit or take off any bags that you've left on the seat that you're not planning to sit on with your own butt. We want to make sure that there's room for all of our butts here today. Thanks. So we will be reconvening in 5 minutes, 9:40.
Hello, everyone. Oh, I've never had a microphone before. It's wonderful seeing so many familiar faces here. For those who don't know me, my name is Lauren Jones, and I'm a technician at the Cornell University Insect Collection. And for those who do know me, you probably know exactly where I'm going with this presentation. And it is titled Diagnostic Tools to Identify Exotic Moths. And Jackie has already talked a lot about what the Cornell University Insect Collection is, and you guys all come from your own collections, so many of you probably already know. But we are a 7 million specimen biorepository located in Comstock Hall on the Cornell campus. And here's some wonderful pictures of our collection. And again, like Jackie said, we already got some wonderful renovations of our secondary room. And of course, we do all kinds of fun stuff in the collection. Again, stuff that many of you guys do in your own collections already. But I want to talk about a particular project that I'm involved in, which is a USDA and APHIS-funded project titled Diagnostic Tools to Identify Exotic Tortricity that Threaten U.S. Agriculture. Ah, yes, the tortricity, the superior form of all that is Lepidoptera. I'm glad you all agree. And what exactly are the tortricity? Well, they are a part of what is colloquially known as the micromoths, which is a huge group of moths. It's essentially the first basal half of all Lepidoptera. And they are characterized, they're known as Tortrix moths, also known as leaf roller moths, but don't get confused. They actually employ many different types of feeding strategies. Some of them burrow in between the layers of leaves. Some of them burrow in the stems, some roots, some buds. And they're characterized by typical Lepidoptera characteristics, although these are quite small. They're often drab. And this family in particular is characterized by their arrangement of the labial palps. But of course, like every insect group, there's always exceptions, and that doesn't always hold up. Some are diurnal, some are nocturnal. Here they are in a phylogeny up at the top. And yes, technically butterflies are also micromoths. Don't at me. And blah, 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 a bunch of other cool facts about tortricids. Okay, Lauren, I get it, but where is the money? Show me where the money's at, right? You got me. They are huge agricultural pests. And not only are they huge agricultural pests, but there are already several species that are already established from the Entomological and European regions of the world in the US. And they feed on all kinds of different things, right? We have some apple and pear feeders, cherries, plums. We have grapevines and general vines feeders, ornamental plant feeders, right? So people really care about their gardens and whatnot, and these will attack those as well. That's Grapholita delineana, a hemp feeder. You can all imagine why we might care about that one. We have some general fruit and rose feeders. And then what's really frustrating is a lot of them are generalists. They're actually very, very polyphagous and can feed on numerous different plants. And something you might notice here too is all these things are, despite being small, are quite characteristic. Even the layman probably wouldn't confuse too many of these with one another. But I work particularly on micromoths from Latin America, from the neotropics. And as you progress more, you realize it becomes very, very difficult to distinguish these things on their wing pattern alone. And here's a couple of examples. This is Templemania, very flashy, beautiful little moth. And to the layman, that might be a little confusing. I can distinguish them, and they also might look a little different to you. But this gets worse. This is Clepsis. This might be a different species. They might be the same. It might be the male and the female. I don't know. I barcoded a bunch of these things recently, and the sequences came back way worse than I thought they were. And I could not differentiate a lot of them, despite them saying that they were different. This is a Claris. This is a neotropical representative, but this is a notorious genus that is actually far more diverse as you progress into the Nearctic realm of the world, so North America. So much so that there is, and not only in wing pattern, or not only in species, but particularly in wing pattern, so much so that there's one species, a Claris cristata, that has been accidentally redescribed over 100 different times because there are over 137 different polymorphs of that one species alone. So you can see this problem becomes very difficult. This is another problematic group. This is the Adarines, and this is in particular Tina crucis. And this is probably the female and the male. I don't know, because when we sequence these things, it's really messy, and it does not help us at all differentiating these species. And this problem continues to get worse, right? This is a group called Citronia. These are the official holotype images from the species descriptions, and this is what I'm working with. This is the kind of stuff that I am dealing with. And something I want to hone in here now, but actually, I'll save it for a little bit. And this group in particular, I'm fascinated with because I'm actually describing a few species from this group coming out of the project that we are wrapping up now. But you can see these things are messy. We only collected a few individuals, usually one of a particular species that we're describing. And the material isn't always that great. And so kind of summarizing where we're at right now, right? The generalist and devastating nature of these things and our ability to properly identify them really calls for some sort of action, right? They pose a great risk of becoming invasive, and it's very difficult to control these things without further damaging our own environment, right? We have to be very particular about the methods and what kind of feeding strategies they're employing to take care of them. And the ones from the neotropics are they're notoriously underdescribed. So much so that most species have been described in the last 30 to 40 years by like 3 or 4 people, primarily by one person named Rosowski, who described over like 1,100 species in 40 years. I don't know how he did that. And most of them are only known from one sex and only one specimen. And we do not know the life histories of most of them. And like I said, they employ many different feeding strategies. We have no idea what they're actually feeding on when we collect these adults. And there's lots of initiatives to try to figure that out. There's lots of people who are there's one person named Dan Jansen that lives half the year in Costa Rica and spends a lot of time sequencing these things and breeding them so we can kind of figure out what they might feed on. And so because of this, tools and resources need to be created and employed to help us properly identify these things. And I want to talk a little bit about the tools and resources that I actually have learned and used since then. And so any good systematicist or taxonomist will start with this. Find your focal group and organize them by what you think is a species. I've already mentioned that the wing pattern for these things is really difficult to distinguish. And a lot of my drawers end up looking like this, where I think there's dozens of different species in there. And unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, kind of cool, but sort of unfortunate for me is a lot of these things are just new species, right? So I can't even really properly identify them. But anyway, next step is photography. This kind of feeds, and you guys will understand this as well, into this bigger idea of digitization of collections, right? If I can't figure it out, if I can at least photograph it and post it online or talk to some of my other moth colleagues, they might be able to help me narrow it down a little bit. And it's also helpful to preserve that photo for the next step, which is actually dissection. And so what exactly am I dissecting? It is the genitalia. As it turns out, the genitalia is very characteristic for these things. And what does that dissection process look like? Well, first you start with your micromoth. This is the worst part for me because I have to maim the little thing, unfortunately, and rip off the abdomen in its entirety. And then I put this in KOH. I usually use 20%. It depends on how much you use it. And it depends on this next step, right? How long you let it sit, because you'll wait. I usually wait about a day, letting it dissolve away until it's translucent. I can put it on a hot plate if I'm in a rush. And then using fine dissecting forceps and a nice fine paintbrush, I actually will take it out of the KOH and water it down, and then to get rid of the rest of the KOH, and then brush down those scales and clean it up a little bit. And then I use what is known as chlorazole black and eosine Y. And these chemicals alone are probably why I should never have children. They are serious carcinogens and reproductive destroyers. I think I'm fine, I think. So I stain it with eosine Y. This actually targets sclerotide structures, and I have to wait a little longer to let this sit. And then the chlorazole black, I just dab it in that real quick because this stains membranous structures and does it very rapidly, and I don't want to overstain. And then I will continue to clean off the rest of the excess stain. And for the males, it's actually a really simple process. It turns out the genital capsule is all contained in one little unit, and I can just pop that bad boy out. But for females, I actually have to go in with some very fine dissecting scissors in order to cut them out, actually. And you can see that's kind of what the structure looks like. And I love this next slide because it means I get to do this. Plaster moth genitalia all over the screen for you all to be forced to look at. And what's crazy about these things is I can look at this genitalia without knowing anything about the adult and tell you what genus it is in based on that alone, right? We have some Cydia at the top left corner thing, Olathrodes, top and bottom. In the middle, that's Episemus. Even this female is kind of characteristic. It has a really sort of kinked up ductus bursa. That's Clepsis. I showed you one of those on the other slide. A couple other fun representatives. And to prove to you that I did get better at photographing these things over time, here's some of my more recent photographs. Look, these things look like art pieces, actually, when the stain comes out really well. I've been told numerous times that I should hang this up on my wall. I'm not a weirdo, I promise. But this is not a silver bullet because this becomes progressively more difficult as you look more at the genitalia, particularly for genera groups. because apparently these are all the different species. Apparently these are all a different species. And apparently these scientific drawings are also a different species. And this genus Henricus on its own has like 40 plus species that I have to sort through, okay? And to some taxonomists, there might be very characteristic, but when I start looking at all of these together, trying to figure out what species mine is, particularly when the wing pattern is not doing anything important for me, this becomes very difficult. And it really starts to blur the line between what is a new species and what's not for me. Because a lot of these things are also very variable. And the dissection can go perfectly fine for me, but other things can distort it later in the process, or again, sometimes they're just variable. But this becomes even more difficult for females because they're even less characteristic, more membranous, and look more like each other for many of these groups. These are all apparently different species of Henricus, same genus there, and the other one over there, that's Megalota. That's a group that another colleague of mine, John Brown's, worked at. He's giving me a tour of the Smithsonian this weekend, so I'm really excited for that. Right, and so if this doesn't work, what is the next logical step? And many of you guys probably already know this. Of course, it's something very new, which is DNA sequencing. But this is also not a silver bullet, unfortunately, because there are many barcodes of these things that overlap with one another, even though they're definitely different species, at least based on the morphology alone. And then sort of wrapping up, you compare and identify your new species. And we talked a little bit about how negative these things are and how difficult it is to identify them and how agriculturally significant they are. But I do want to leave you with a few slides that are really cool to me. This is a bunch of ones that I have photographed over the time of being at Cornell. And you can really see the beauty and diversity that these things display. I mean, it's really important to figure out what are new species, not just because they're agricultural pests, but because they all serve a unique, significant role in their own environment, right? And those environments are decaying slowly, unfortunately. And out of this project, what's really exciting for me, especially as a new researcher, is I get to describe several new species from this project. This is just 2 I have up here, but there's seven I have lined up, and there's probably way more in like the 7+ drawers of tortricids that I have. And that is the end of my presentation. And I can take questions. 2 minutes of questions.
I have a question about when you said that same species have DNA overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Can you clarify, you mean that they have identical one?
Yes, that exactly. Because we sequence stuff, we send it up to Guelph, to the BOLD. I don't remember what the acronym is, but it's up in Canada. And because they use all that cytochrome oxidase 1, sometimes those among species groups within genera can be very close to one another, even though when you look at the morphology, it's not lining up, and you probably have a new species there. They can be identical, yes. It's not always the case, but they can, just because it's only one small section of that larger genomic code. It makes sense that sometimes it could overlap, even though the rest around it might be different. And it's just because we use that one section only. Yes.
A chemical profile of pheromones, do you think that would help aid in like species differentiation?
Yeah, that's a little outside of my realm, and that's a really interesting question, actually. I've never really thought about it like that. I'm a taxonomist. I mainly look at morphology and now I guess sequencing. But I don't know. I actually never really thought about that, and I think that's kind of cool because I know we can sequence pheromones as well to help. That's how I bait some of the ceciads and other moths that I collect. Yes.
So I know that you were using KOH.
Yes. Yeah.
So maybe I'm trying to not use that and maybe look at muscles.
Yeah. The problem is that the genitalia have a lot of like scaling, or the abdomens have a lot of scaling that block those genitalia. Sometimes you can brush them away without dissolving anything at all, and you can look at the internal bits. You mean the musculature of the genitalia themselves? Yeah, usually the KOH process is you have to dissolve away those scales, and that's how I'm actually able to see and photograph those genitalia. Okay. But there are some methods that some lepidopterists use, especially for the macroleps. They can more easily see those genitalia by just brushing stuff away. And some people only pop the last segment off too, but yes.
Yeah, well, it's a very good talk, but
Thank you.
I just have a comment to the people. If you're able to reduce slightly the brightness
Oh yeah.
of the projector, because several of the talks, the white slides, with yellow, pale yellow or blue.
And unfortunately for the genitalia, the genitalia were also kind of translucent, so that definitely didn't help my slide that much.
Yeah, and good talk.
Thank you. Yes.
So you develop a better and better reference collection of what you think are the species.
Yeah.
What do you think the hopes are of AI to be able to separate the color of the?
Ooh. That's super cool. So the way I view it is all those methods I have are tools, and I kind of need all those tools collectively to help. So if the AI can do that, if it can look at dissections, as well as looking at like maybe barcodes as well, and the wing pattern, unless you're just focusing just on wing pattern. For many of them, it's very difficult, especially because of that polymorphic nature. Some of them too, if you don't have a great specimen, they can be really worn away and messy. Some of the scales can be missing, but I have thought about that recently. And I think some people are kind of doing that already now. I don't know. I'm kind of waiting to see what people could do. I'm not a coder myself. I don't know if I could do the AI, but that's a really cool idea, I think. And I think that's it for questions. Thank you, guys.
Okay, and next, Natalie Belskay asks us, quels sont mes amis devenus? Searching for Walker's catalog, Chalcidoidea specimens.
Yeah, hi, Natalie Delsky. I'm the curator of chalcidoids at the Natural History Museum in London, and I'm going to be talking about a project I've been working on recently, looking for some historical material. So before I start, my title contains a reference to what I thought was a very famous song, but it turns out is not famous at all. So Que sont mes amis devenus is the first line of, in fact, a poem of the 13th century that was turned into a song in the 50s and covered by quite a few people, including John Baez, whose version you can get to using Discord. And the first verse translates roughly to whatever happened of my friends, which I held so close and loved so dearly. They were scattered too far and wide. I think the wind took them away. Love has died. So is this an appropriate reference for a project which involves looking for specimens? We will see. So in this case, the scattered friends I'm looking for are Chalcidoidea specimens. And just to remind you of what Chalcidoidea are, it's a superfamily of Microhymenoptera containing currently around 28,000 species. And the estimated holdings at the museum in London are around the 500,000 mark. And they are, of course, the coolest of all insects, but you don't have to take my word for it. You can take Francis Walker's word instead. So Francis Walker was, of course, a famous entomologist of the 19th century. If you haven't read it yet, I encourage you to read Neil Evanhuis' article on Walker, which you can get to using Discord. And I will not go into how good or how bad he was as a taxonomist. I leave you with those two quotes, one from a famous obituary and one from Walker himself, both of which seem to suggest that his taxonomic skills were somewhat lacking, which is something to keep in mind for my project. But what we know for sure about Walker is that he loved Chalcidoidea and he described a lot of them. So just to illustrate how important he was as a chalcidoid person in Victorian times, this is a chart of all chalcidoid species described up to Walker's death. And you can see here described almost exactly half of them. And his contribution was 3 times as large as that of anyone else who was working on chalcidoids at the time. And of course, if you work in London, he's also very important because he's the author of this catalog, a list of all chalcidoid specimens in the BN. So this was part of a series of publications that Walker was contracted to write by the museum. But this part, the chalcidoid part, which was published first, he apparently did it for free, just out of love for chalcidoids. And it purports to contain an exhaustive list of all the specimens in the collection at the time, and also has the appendices with descriptions of new species. So the catalog is organized taxonomically with a genus species, and then for each species you have a list of specimens with where they were collected and who collected them or donated them to the museum. And what is striking, if you look at it from today's point of view, is there's never an indication of type status. But of course, at the time, the notion of type was practically non-existent. There's no indication of gender, and there's no mention ever of unidentified material. So what numbers do you get from the catalog? 2,248 specimens. They're mainly from England and mainly donated by Walker himself. There's quite a few specimens collected by Darwin. So this heat map of the specimens at the time shows you that it was mainly England material, and that the global coverage was not really that good. I think there's a total of 3 specimens for the whole of Africa. And this is, we don't have, of course, a list of all our specimens in our collection, but just using specimens with specimen records with a country level collecting data, this is the coverage map we get from the collections today. So you can see there's been some improvement. And that's just under, in the catalog, just under 1,800 species, which was just above half of the species described at the time. And again, they're mainly Walker species. So it looks like at the time you can think the collection in London was consisted by and large of material donated by Walker, identified by Walker, and species described by Walker. And if you look now, it's just to illustrate that the collection is, of course, not dominated as much by Walker species. So these numbers, both for specimen and species, have to be taken with a pinch of salt, because all the species of all the specimens, or the vast majority of the specimens, were identified by Walker, and we have good reason to think this might not always be reliable. And also there's these inconsistencies in the listing of specimens. In quite a few cases, the entry in the catalog is for just 1 specimen, and it's obvious from the material there was in fact more than 1 specimen. So the number of 2,248 is to be taken as a minimum number. So what possessed me, you may well ask, to go and look for those specimens in the 2,000 or so drawers we have in a collection? Well, it started when I received, in reply to an inquiry, I included a comment to the effect that the fact that a specimen was listed in Walker's catalog was no guarantee that we could find it in a collection today. And that got me wondering, actually, would I be able to find it? How easy would it be? And before I knew it, I was at stage 1 of a curatorial project where I just wondered about something, quickly followed by stage 2, where I convinced myself it wouldn't take a lot of time. And stage 3, submitting a talk about the project, hoping that will make me complete the project. So here I am. So what did I do? I passed the data from the catalog to have a list of specimens in a spreadsheet with the original information from Walker, the current name, where they were supposed to be in the collection. And my idea was to just see which ones I could find quickly. So just looking in that place in the collection, not doing a complete survey. And when I found specimens which were either definitively or potentially specimens from Walker's catalog, I imaged the labels and gave them QR code so that I can create specimen records for them. And what slowed me down quite a bit is I found quite a lot of potential type materials, so I had to verify it. So I knew where to look for the specimen, but how would I recognize them? Because of course, Walker did not put labels saying catalog, page 1, etc. So what I was hoping to find was the first hope, the best type of labels are those register labels, which have either specimen numbers or specimen lots numbers or a mixture of both. And all of those can be matched to an entry in our acquisition register. So you can check when the specimen was acquired, who donated it, and sometimes also where it was collected. The next type of labels were X-drawer labels. So we know Walker did not label specimens individually. He would put a label in the drawer and the specimens above that label. And these are examples that these X-drawer labels, at some point, somebody put them on the specimen. So the printed labels are actually cut out from Walker's catalog, which is something apparently he did. He waited for the publication and then cut it apart to create lots of labels. and the handwritten labels is in Walker's handwriting. So these two types of labels are like original labels, if you want. And the next type of label I was hoping for is labels put on by people who worked on the collection at a later stage. And either it repeats information from the register, so that maybe the specimen was next in a box from that acquisition. I don't know the original information is not that, but somebody kept track of it. And a special case of this is what we call Waterhouse labels. So Waterhouse worked at the museum from 1866 onwards, and at some point, we don't know when he labeled most or all the specimens with the name under which they were the collection at this time, and sometimes also locality labels. And of course, finally, any labels that tells me the collection, the specimen was not in the collection in 1848, so I can eliminate this specimen is also useful. So I was hoping to find all those labels, and I was looking forward to that, but I also knew there were issues. And one of the main issues is the drawer labels when the collection is rearranged, which we know Walker himself did at least once in 1860. You can keep the drawer labels so you can see they're very large, so they would increase the footprint of the specimen, especially a calcidoid specimen, quite dramatically. They're printed on paper, so they become brittle. If you fold them, they tend to fall apart after a while. And if you re-identify a specimen, you might think it's not worth keeping that information. So you have here labels of past curators of the museum who clearly tried, curatorial heroes, who tried to keep track of past identification, but there's no reason to think that has always been the case. And if the drawer labels are too big, there are other labels which are just too small. So these little labels, you can judge the size by the size of the pinhole. I don't know if there was a paper shortage at the time in the UK, but who thought it was a good idea to have labels which are just twice the size of the pin? So these ones, they've been pinned more than once, also the paper, they fall apart, the ink bleeds into the paper, and I don't know when it became a big no-no to remove labels from specimens, but I suspect this was not always the case, and some of those disappeared. And finally, the Waterhouse labels, we don't know when he put them on, but it was much after the publication of the catalog, like this one, for instance. It's a species that was described in 1872, so that gives me a sort of earliest date. So the identification on the Waterhouse label is the identification at that time, rather than the identification at the time of Walker's catalog. So what did I find? Well, some specimens have all the labels you could hope for. This one you see has a register label, a Waterhouse label, extra label for identification, extra label for collecting data, and further labels from Bocek, a famous calcite person who worked on the collection. So that's a specimen I can, without hesitation, say, yes, it's a specimen from the catalog. I can match everything precisely to Walker's entry. Then there's other specimens which have, like in this case, only one label, but it doesn't matter because it's the best type of label. It's a register label. So I can match that to the data in our acquisitions register. It matches the entry in Walker's catalog. And again, I'm happy to register this as a Walker catalog specimen. And then, of course, on a lot of specimens, you have labels, which it's one or several, but the information is ambiguous. So Waterhouse specimens, I explained already, is not good enough. The Walker collection, unfortunately, we acquired, well, not unfortunately, it's good that we acquired material from Walker. But for this project, it's not so good in several acquisitions, so I don't know which one was from 1848. And there's like numbers, I'm not sure at the moment what they refer to. So a lot of specimens are registered as potentially from Walker's catalog. And then, of course, there are specimens which have no labels at all, which clearly is not good. So in some cases, you can still have sort of potential information from which other specimens are next to it, the style of mounting. And even though this is clearly not satisfactory, there are some cases which you still find where people, for instance, designated lectotypes and didn't put a lectotype label on the specimen, but in a publication said it's the third specimen in the series. So it might still be useful to keep track of a position of specimens for historical material. So it turns out that submitting a talk does not make a project complete itself magically, which I was disappointed, and it might not surprise you, I haven't had time yet to look for all 2,248 specimens. The one I had time to look for, I actually found quite a few, but in this case, a lot of them, they were Darwin types, so types which were collected by Darwin, and they tend to have kept most of their labels. And I found a lot of material which were just potentially from the catalog. But that's not, for me, it's not the main thing. I found a lot of types. I found some interesting historical material. And I learned an awful lot about our collection, who put what labels at one point and what happened. So for me, that was definitely the best outcome of the project. And was my song reference appropriate? So my friends have been scattered, but that's a good thing because it means the collection is being worked on. The problem is a loss of information that came with the scattering, and hopefully with modern curatorial practices that won't happen anymore. And of course, love hasn't died. Thank you.
Okay, again, in an effort to get us close to back on time, we're just gonna bring John Harity up to take us from paradox to new online Chalcidoidea database.
A rags to riches story.
Okay, I'll do my best to destroy your timing entirely. I realize this is the first time I've ever talked at ECN. For all the years that I've attended here, you finally get to hear me, and you'll probably be glad when I'm finished. Okay, so this is from paradox to a new online Chalcidoidea database. I'll try to explain the title as the talk goes on, but this has been a big collaborative effort by a large number of people. And a lot of people that have been really important in this are Taxon Works, the Natural History Museum, and some funding by the USDA Agricultural Research Service over the last year. One person on this stands out as my superhero here, Roger Burks. He's been doing a lot of the programming. He also knows an incredible lot about chalcidoids, so he's been really important in migrating his whole database and sort of maintaining some control and the output that I'm about to slowly get to. The second superhero in this whole group is John Noyes at the British Museum. He single-handedly took the card catalog that he'd been inherited, and he managed to transform this into an electronic database when people were just barely able to think about it. And for those of you who wondered what the paradox was, this little, I don't know if my cursor works here. No, it doesn't work. Anybody see a cursor? No. That little thing down there in the bottom corner, where it disappeared, it came back. I can't see it. Oh, that's going to confuse me. Anyway, Paradox is an old archaic program that was originally in DOS format. And for those of you who know and have watched the migration and death of databases over the years as new software platforms come out and say that you can't use that anymore, Paradox is not the thing that you want to be stuck with. Anyway, a single database, and he would export the data tables to somebody at the British Museum who exposed these on a web page. And this became, for a large community of scientists, a really important source of a bunch of very nice, important things of information on the chalcidoids, which all of you may know how diverse they are. And I'll try and give you an idea of this as we go along, but I want to sort of emphasize certain things. But I'm going to pick this as a topic here, associates of named chalcidoids. There are people that really actually care about that, to know what they're actually attacking and what parasitoids. So what are we doing? This is how John Noyes' output comes out of that database. Simple old web-based database. The British Museum wants to kill this because it's no longer in a format that can be secure and protected. So eventually it's going to disappear, but you get this nice little list. It breaks it down into ant parasitoids. This is Eucharis ascendens, of course, one of my poster children of eucharidids. And you go down and it's got a really nice set of things going down there. In that bottom corner over there, you can see PDF. John Noyes spent all his nights making high resolution PDFs of all of the literature that is out there. And when he asserted that it was copyright free, he would actually make it exposed over the web so anybody could get access to that. So that's an important resource that we'd be able to look at. It also nicely sorts it out. So you've got the insect associates, and then you got the plant associates and things like that, and that'll come up a little bit later. But we needed to change and migrate this, and I think this is something that David had talked about, that we need to come up with a database, you know, we had one that's accessible, but it's going to die. We need something which is collaborative, and we needed a resource to be able to do that. So along comes this faded out, sorry, Luke. This is this faded out version of what Taxon works like. And this is our giant workhorse that we're looking at. So it's a powerful but complex tool. And you can see down in the bottom corner there, it's got basically, or up in the top there, 23,378 valid species in 53 families now, for those of you who haven't been keeping up to yesterday's publication. And we have 116,783 host associate records, 107,689 distribution records, 57,963 publications, most associated with PDFs. And I will say that John Noyes was responsible for the large bulk of all that stuff in, but we didn't want to walk away from that. We wanted to migrate all of this in Taxon work. So this has been part of our NSF, is to migrate all of this information that you can't see. And you know, you can do cool things with Taxon works that I can't do with other things. I can sit there and say, okay, how many species were described by year over the years from 1758, and I can look at all this and do things like that. The amount of information is incredible. We can come up with this and say, like, okay, if you look at the yellow boxes, that can tell me that I've got 1,760 asserted distributions, and we've got biological associations and some other facts. So I've got a whole bunch of data that I can do all sorts of things with. And if you want to sit down later, I can show you how you can do these in Taxon works, but that's not really the point of what I'm trying to talk about here. And we're migrating off here. Okay, so I can do cool things too. Like we're working on a book on Chalcidoidea. And one of the things I can do is I can tag all of the references in there. I can pull them up on the screen, do a nice little filter sources thing in Taxon works. I can do a formatted bibliography. I can export that into all sorts of things. I can export as bibtext or whatever I want. I can proof check against my chapters. It's a really cool tool. But again, I want to do the workhorse here is, and again, you can't see it, but this is browse nomenclature and classification. I get the Eucharis, I can get all the synonyms and everything else that I want to do there. I can go to the OTU page that's associated with it, and I can look at the biological association. That is horrendous for me. I can see all the records there. It's all the records, it's the same host records that I showed you from John Noyes' database, but it's completely unintelligible when I first look at it. It's there, I can download it and I can do all sorts of things with it, but it's a little bit difficult to deal with. It's also got some issues. It's a difficult database to deal with. So I sat there and I'm playing around and I thought, well, I'll go to filter biological associations and I'll come up and I'll look at the same sort of list of what associates there are for the same species, Eucharis ascendens. Well, what do I get? I get nothing. And I'm going like, oh God. And so the problem of just, you know, one of the things is Taxon Works is you have to be trained to be able to use the database. It's not something I can just release to the public and say, okay, just go ahead, have at it. So anyway, this was an easy fix. I went to my third superhero, which is Jim Woolley, and he says, well, you should just sit there and just circle subject and click that one little box, and all of a sudden all the associations come up. And you can see the little smirk he has on his face there, because he absolutely loves to show me something that I couldn't figure out. Okay, so what do we do now? So the thing is, David brought it up as saying they don't have something to exit. We can't wait for Taxon Works. So thanks to the USDA, we got some funding for Roger Birch to go through and come up with a web portal to try and mimic what John Noyes has done within that. And now I'm going to do something very dangerous. I am going to try and bring this up. And I got to come over. Help. Tell me I have to move over a new screen here, which you won't be able to see either.
Technology or John?
There we go. Okay, so there's the universal Chalcidoidea. This is live. This is a super presentation. Everything's going to fail now. But anyway, so, and I can't see, let's see. No. Now I can't see my cursor on the screen. Okay, there we are. Okay, search names. Okay, nice thing is I can do a regular search here. I can type in the full names, which you can barely see. I can type this. I can do an autocomplete. So all I need is Euch, add, send. And then I'll come up with Eucharis ascendens. I can come up with a nice little thing, give me my taxonomic history. I can scroll down, scroll up, scroll down. I got my host associations all nicely laid out. It's only grouped by alphabetical order. It's not grouped by plants or insects, which I'd really like to see. I can come down to, let's see, over on the other side over there, which is interesting screen. You've got maps and distribution references and everything you ever want to know about the species. So let me try this again. If I want to search associates, I can again go here. You ascendens, and I come up here. It essentially gives me the same page, but also, you know, this is just, I can also collapse all these things and say, okay, I don't want to look at nomenclature. I just want to look at those biological associations, and I don't care about taxonomic history, which if I keep losing my cursor there. Okay, this is, okay, come on. Where's my cursor now? Anybody see my cursor? You know, my cursor is here again. Sorry. I'm old. I can't, I lose my cursor all the time. There we are. That was easy. Okay, search associates. Now this is one which is, so the other one is you can back search. And this is what the biocontrol people really want, which is to be able to say, okay, for seroplasties. Now, this is another one where it freaked me out when I first did this, because I sat there and I thought, oh God, it's a blank screen. So I contacted Roger Burks and said, like, what's wrong with this program? Why is it failing? It can't fail like this. But this is actually where you tell a joke. What did the dung beetle say when it walked into the bar? Is this stool taken? Yes. Okay, so if I wait long enough, then this whole thing comes up. And the thing was, that's all the data which is there for all the host associations for chalcidoids that are found on seroplasties. So it's an immense amount of data. And the cool thing you can do is up at the top here, you can download this into files that you can actually manipulate and treat with on the side. So it'll parse everything out into hosts and references and all of that other information. I can browse by country, I can go down here to Germany. Let's see, where's Germany? Germany. I want to pick on it. I want to say, okay, what is my list of all the species of Chalcidoidea in Germany? And there's some cool things that TaxonWorks can do. You can actually draw polygons now about different countries and things like that that you can't do on this thing. But I can come down here and I can always drift down here and I can find my Eucharis, and there's my ascendens there, and I can track that up and get back to my thing. It's also got a taxonomic tree over here. I can come down here and come down and say, okay, I want to come down here and look at eucharidids. Oh, I didn't want eulophids, and I lost my cursor again. Anyway, I can do this and basically go through all that. And so now this is what is for, and now I need to go back. Sorry. Getting your exercise today. I need to go back to that. Yeah. Back to the slide version. Okay, so this is for all the people, the programmers and the audience that really want to know what this looks like. I have absolutely no idea what any of this stuff means, and I never will, but this is what Roger Burks used to put together this webpage and drag this all together. And I think we need things like, one thing is that the difficulty is TaxonWorks. You can go inside if you're a participant and working in it, you can get access to all those PDFs, which is a wonderful resource. And so we encourage people to actually learn and get trained how to use it so they can actually get that. We're trying to find some way of exposing it. It'd be nice to say that everything before 1938 or whatever could be exposed as a PDF, but there apparently are still some other issues in there that we need to deal with. Recent literature, maybe we can just throw the DOIs on there, but then that locks out people that can't get access to that literature through their institution. So we want to try and find some way of making that available. So it'd be an ongoing discussion. I sort of would like things organized in the database to have plants and animals separated. Funding for this is, you know, we're out of funds for this now, and it would be nice to do it. Roger right now is doing this all out of the goodness of his own heart. So he's, again, focused into my superhero category. But these are some other superheroes on here. And this is what David was talking about. It's a collaborative network, and we have a barbecue session every Wednesday morning. Anybody who feels like they want to join in and code data in for chalcidoids, please do. We have an international collaboration from all the way from Romania to various places. We all get together and sit there and go through the new literature and sort of add in all the taxonomic information. So our database is what we like to think is completely up to date. at the moment for what we're talking about. And John Noy's database was stopped in 2019. And there has been a lot of data that's been added since then. But all these people are great and they're adding lots of information. And that's many thanks to all that and all these people and all the funding sources and everything's got it so far. And hopefully we can, I found so many mistakes as I was putting together this presentation that there's still a lot of work that has to be done to bring this up to full speed, but we are doing our best. So thank you. I have never given a presentation where I've got 2 minutes left in my life. Any questions? Yes.
That code that you showed that Roger did for the interface.
Yes.
Is that freely available? So if somebody else uses TaxonWorks, they'll just say, hey, here's the interface, change the names, and use it.
Tommy can probably answer that better than I can. Where is he? He's outside. In TaxonWorks, I mean, they're looking for coders and things like that. So if you want to talk to Matt Yoder about getting involved in that group on that side. As far as Roger's database, as far as updating that, it's all GitHub repository. So the GitHub code is open source and available. And I'm sure that if you want to go in and update, and if you want to get in there and try and fix up some of those pages to make them do certain things and work with Roger, I'm sure he would be very glad for the help. Anything else? Yes.
Could that be made eventually available as a flash drive or something for the people in countries who don't have a lot of internet connections, so they could put the entire database on the.
No, it will be. It's going to be internet based. I mean, that's the only way of exposing this now. I mean, it's not something that we can download into. I mean, there is a way in TaxonWorks of making catalogs. So we will still have the way of making, there is a taxon catalog generating program, so we can produce those catalogs, but this interface it's way beyond that. And hopefully everybody's going to have a web-based access at some point in time. Yes.
Hey, John, if people want to get involved with TaxonWorks or, UPD, how can they do that?
Contact Jim Woolley. For Kelsa, you can contact Jim Woolley or myself. Just email us and we can give you access to TaxonWorks. Actually, if you go on YouTube and you want to find out more about TaxonWorks, just look up TaxonWorks and there's a whole series of training videos on there to show exactly how it works on the, that hardcore workhorse side of the database. So, it's pretty easy to track it up, and there's more and more groups that are joining in on TaxonWorks. There's beetle groups, there's the Orthopterus species file is migrated over to TaxonWorks now, and there's a number of different programs. So, and I think that the funding they have through the Institute is more or less permanent, and because they're trying to make it into something which isn't like Paradox, which is going to die with every software update that you get onto a computer platform. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we are going to shift gears a little bit. Our next presenter, Brendan Boudneau, is not well. And so he is hopefully going to be joining us from home. Yes, I see his face on here. So he's going to be talking about a large scale micro CT scanning lessons learned.
Yeah, hi, we're just gonna get this organized first before we go. Is this chaotic? Can you see what you need to see? Okay, I think so. We're gonna get this worked out before. Ugh, sorry, cat. I'm gonna try to get this going. So I don't know. Do you guys see just the slides or do you see the whole screen? I don't know.
If you could swap, we can see
Great.
the presenter view.
Great. Well, then here we go. Does this work?
Yep.
All right. So I'll start from here. Hey, everybody. I wish I could be there. I'm literally not that far. I just have a little bit of a flu or a cold. And yeah, and I figured it would be better to not risk it by getting anyone sick. So today I'm going to be telling you about some things that I've learned about doing large and small scale microcomputed tomography projects. And I'm going to emphasize the small scale projects because the large scale is a special thing and really only possible under certain circumstances. So we can talk about that later. The first and most important thing I want to argue is that it's happening now. Morphology is becoming a big data science. I think it's pretty fair to call it phenomics. And this is in direct analogy to genomics, where we've got a genotype, we sequence it, we get a genome, we've got a phenotype, we micro CT scan it, we get a phenome. We definitely want to have as many modes of visual information as possible, but the micro CT scanner plays a critical role in generating whole specimen, three-dimensional objective information. So how does this work? We've got an X-ray on one side, we've got a sample in the middle, and then we've got an X-ray detector. We turn on the X-ray passes through the specimen, we rotate it, turn on again. We repeat this all the way through 360 degrees of rotation. As the beam passes through the specimen, it's attenuated by the variable densities of the tissues. We end up with a full 360 degree rotation of vertical planes. Now, using an algorithm, we can then reconstruct what the cross sections look like. So we get a neat stack of XY TIFFs, basically, or JPEGs, or whatever you want. So we get what we call tomograms. From these tomograms, we can reconstruct surface models, volume models, where we can separate out any particular soft tissue that we care about, or any structure that we care about in general. With these reconstructed models, we can then do things like biomechanical modeling, which can tell us about form-function relationships. This particular paper is lovely and demonstrates that diet doesn't matter in terms of the actual biomechanical constraints of ant mandibles. I can talk about that as well. We can also 3D print the models, and I think this is super powerful. This is from a study where my colleague Adrian Richter and I 3D printed head and mandibles of an ant, and we're able to reconstruct the actual limited range of motion because of the highly derived mandibular articulations. But now, for the rest of the talk, I want to emphasize the preservational requirements and provide a few case studies. So, the first and most important question is, are you working with wet specimens or dry specimens? If you're working with dry specimens, there's nothing you need to do. The specimen is good to go. You just don't get any meaningful soft tissue information. Okay, if you're working with a wet specimen, the next question is, are you doing conventional scanning or synchrotron scanning? With conventional scanning, you need to stain to increase contrast. With synchrotron scanning, you don't need to do any staining because the beam of energy is so high that you actually the contrast should be sufficient. You can put the specimen almost a meter away and get what is effectively phase contrast effect. So no staining for synchrotron. You're actually going to burn your images if you do that, and that's something learned from experience. So focusing on excuse me. This is going to be a very interesting talk today. So dry material. Dry material is, as I mentioned, very easy. And I think the best application of dry material is for exploring the external morphology of specimens, but then also doing what we can legitimately call cyber typing. All of these on the left-hand side are type specimens of this little ant genus Discothyria. On the right-hand sides are 2D depictions of the ants based on the micro CT data. But we can also make a simple volume render of these and explore the type in ways that we couldn't have done before. So for example, we're looking now between the middle and the hind coccyx, which is very significant. We can look on the underside of the head if we want to, which can be tricky. Anyway, this is a really useful tool. when it comes to preserving specimens that we don't want damaged at all into the future. Wet material is my preferred mode of working with specimens for scanning, primarily to preserve soft tissues. It's very, very easy. Preserve it in 70% ethanol, 100% ethanol. Preserve it in 70, step it up to 100. It really only matters on what degree of soft tissue shape preservation do you need. If you're working with skeletal musculature, you can take that specimen out of the air, put it into 95% ethanol for sequencing, but then actually scan it first, then sequence it. Doesn't seem to be a big deal. If you really need like this cell anatomy level preservation, then use a formalin solution or Bowens or something. And as I mentioned, staining is very easy. It's ethanol iodine. You basically take a gram of iodine metal, dump it into 5 milliliters of 95% ethanol or 100% ethanol. You've got your iodine stain. You dunk the specimen in there for 48 something hours. You take it out and then do a series of washes in whatever ethanol concentration you had, and that destains it. So that way you get clearer contrast. If you don't destain, you're going to lose a lot of information. This really ugly diagram on the right is a symptom of the cold or flu that I've had this past week. I could show you a really nice specimen, but I couldn't go into the museum all week. So instead, this is my diagram of my preferred way of setting up specimens for scanning. Pretend that this is a pipette tip. Pretend that there's 95% ethanol in here. Pretend that this specimen has been stained. I've cut the tip of the tip off, and I've actually burnt it to plug it using a lighter. I jam the specimen in there head first. That's what the smiley face is. Then I plug it with wax. Boom, you're done. The most important thing is to keep the specimen from wiggling. The considerations are that this is non-destructive. It doesn't actually appear to harm DNA as far as any of our preliminary results are suggesting. It could happen, but really, as far as it goes, there appears to be no harm. And there's something important to say about resolution, which is that a lot of studies are publishing with 4 micron or a higher resolution. This is pretty poor. I mean, you can do that for cyber typing, but it's really not ideal, especially for smaller insects, of which ants are in general pretty small. As an example, we can think of a lot of extremely tiny chalcidoids. Of course, if you do something larger like a big beetle, you can do lower resolution. If you really want that super high resolution to have just a body part of interest, you can jam it into that pipette tip, no problem. This is where I would also show you something very nice about museomics. So for example, if I could go into the museum. So I was able to get extremely nice data from a Neodyprion, which was collected into alcohol in 1913, and it was in the Smithsonian collection for over 100 years in ethanol, and it was one of the nicer specimens from the scanning that I did at the Smithsonian. So it's real. I really don't have that much time, so I'm just going to run through case examples very quickly. External body, musculature. The musculature provides us a huge amount of information. We can separate out body parts like the prosternum. We can use this for character discovery, literally from 11 characters to 124 for just the prosternum, understand the evolution of morphology. Fossils, though, is something that I wish I could spend more time on. I can't. So I'm going to show you a little bit of this, and hopefully I can get to the end. The main point of this figure here is that we've got a fossil and it's jammed into beeswax on a stud. This is all you need to do for amber. There's nothing special. You then put it in the X-ray beam, and if you're using a synchrotron, you may or may not get what it can be called a burn, but it's not a burn. This appears to be something about electron excitement that actually reverses over time, but no physicist alive on Earth understands what's happening. But this temporary burning can happen, and it's not a problem with conventional scanning. I'm going to tell you about a very brief case study with the amber collection of Wolfgang von Goethe. So this is a historical collection dating back to basically 1780. We went into his original amber collection. We found all of the amber pieces. We surveyed them by hand. Some of these were giant and actually opaque, so we used the X-ray to scan through them to determine if there's any fossils in them. And for some of them, we found fossils. So here, for example, is an ant, and we're using this for a revision right now. Here's a 3D printout of a certain fossil. And one of the great things about this as well is that we can use this for other means. So here's one of Goethe's amber pieces. In it, we've got a fly, and we've got this very beautiful ant. And we can use this for outreach. What you're seeing in this slide here is that the museum that I was working at, the Philatelisches Museum in Jena, Germany, is doing an entire exhibit using, the micro CT scans, 3D printouts, photographs. It's a great outreach tool. And of course, having the models in your hand makes a huge difference. So for my last case study before closing, and I realize I only have a little bit of time, this is a 100-million-year-old fossil. We scanned all of the ants inside of it. Again, we were able to look at all of the different body parts and different views. Importantly, we were able to take renders at set standardized views, which allowed us to do comparative morphology, which allowed me to revise the taxonomy of this genus. Importantly, it allowed us to actually do digital dissections of these fossils. So we could separate all the mouth parts, we could see the endoskeleton. Here's the fossil in the middle, ants on the right, living ants and living wasps on the left. We were using the digital dissection method. We were able to compare parts of the mouth hole, basically, which is extremely informative. This is unbelievably complex, and we were able to use the fossil in this. This here is we're looking out from the inside of the 100-million-year-old ant fossil head out of the antennal socket. So that's it's pretty wild. Using this, we were able to generate, more than, basically twice as many characters for the head of ants as had previously existed, using a relatively limited sample size. And we were able to discover a lot of defining features of ants thanks to being able to scan this fossil. And the last thing that I want to mention before closing is that if we look at the cross-section of this fossil, it looks like this is all scuzz. We've green and yellow labeled some things. It turns out that the entire internal anatomy of this 100-million-year-old fossil was preserved in 3-dimensional fidelity, from the last thing that it was grooming or eating in its infrabuccal pouch, to glands in the head, the salivary canal, musculature, which was preserved down to individual cross striations, and the brain, which actually we could separate out into all of the individual subregions. And when we took cross sections of the olfactory lobe, we were actually able to count the olfactory glomeruli, which could be very, very significant. And this is, additional work that's ongoing. So, and I would add, this is not a one-off. Lots of fossils have this, but we can talk about that. Just didn't occur to us before scanning. So in summary, micro CT is lovely. It's non-destructive, maybe slightly destructive, but it's reversible. We can talk about it. It's objective, replicable, and extensible. Dry material is suitable for cyber types, or if you really want to document or explore the external morphology of an animal. I love wet material. It's ideal for soft tissue imaging. It requires at least ethanol preservation, and staining is only necessary for conventional scanning. So with that, I want to say that really now is the time. It is now the era of phenomics, and there's a lot of work to do. And of course, with that one very old specimen, love your ethanol material. I wish I could show you a photo of this, but it's imperative now that we preserve this old ethanol material. So with that, I thank my postdoc funding sources, the Smithsonian and the Alexander von Humboldt Stiftung. I'm moving next year to Frankfurt to be Hymenoptera curator at the Senckenberg Naturmuseum. So hit me up. And with that, I will say thank you and I will stop sharing.
Speakers so far. This puts us at break. We don't have time for questions because we're already a bit behind. So if you take another 5-minute break, we can probably try to catch up. So I think that's where we are.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Oh.
All right, if everyone can take their seats, we're gonna try to get started so that we don't steal too much of your lunch. Attention entomologists. Please take your seats. Okay, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and get started looking at the UAM Diptera collection, past, present, and future perspectives with Thales Pereira. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. As said, my name is Thales, and I will talk a little bit about my work in the Diptera collection and about the Diptera collection and the Diptera collection in UAM, University of Alaska Museum, Fairbanks. So I'm from Brazil, and I moved to Alaska 2.5 years ago to work with ant parasitoids, forests. So when I got there, I went through our 4,000, 5,000 specimen collections, and I found no parasitoid. So I went to the field to looking for ant parasitoids, no parasitoids. So I then started to working also with creating the collection, and I will show a little bit how the collection was before Diptera specialists in the group, because if you compare with the Coleoptera collection that Derek Sykes creator, is a finesse, it's beautiful, but the Diptera, it was not so beautiful. So I will show you guys a little bit how was this transition. With me and this project is Derek Sykes and Steve Peak. Steve Peak is a research associate in the museum, and Derek Sykes is the creator. He will talk about the whole collection tomorrow, and so I will focus on Diptera today. So Diptera is the richest order and more abundant also in the Arctic. So even Derek is a work with Coleoptera, and you know, guys, Coleoptera is the most richest order in Arctic. We win, like we always win there. So we have lots of specimens and lots of species too. So lots of morphology and groups and colors that we can find, lots of unknown species too. I will present an ECA, talk about the new species from Alaska that we are describing together. So about the collection, as you can see, there is a huge gap in the abundance too in the collection for any reasons, like how the way they collect, if you get a molest trap, or if you go out to collect, or if you aim a specific group. For example, we have the biggest families and number of specimens are Entomological and Culicidae, because there were two big collections and these families, like looking for biting Diptera. And the Entomology, there is a genus Dahlia that affects crops. So there is also lots of specimen that one study that was made with it. In 2021, Derek, we also talk about that specifically, but in 2001, they went through all the pin collection and count the specimens that we have in the pin collection. So in Diptera, it's the biggest collection, but was in the top 4 orders. Diptera would have less digitized specimens. So we have a problem here about the specimens. Lots of specimens was not digitized or in our database. I would like to put a disclaimer here. So the Diptera collection was not longer taxonomic organized. When you got to the collection, you need to go, oh, I work with Drosophilids. I need to know where is the Drosophilids. You need to go to Arctos because we have a really good system, 99% of the time, where you can track the specimens in the collection. So you type like Drosophilids and they say, oh, the specimen in this room, this cabinet, this drawer, this unit tray. So you can find everything in our collection 99% of the time. So it's a really good system. We don't need a taxonomic organization because you can find specimens. If you have a specimen to add to the Drosophilid drawer, you need to go to Arctos and type Drosophilid and they know where is the drawer is and then put the specimen there. For a taxonomist in the group, when I got there, oh my gosh, like it was hard to find families and groups. So we need to fix that. So when I got there, this is the way that the drawers was labeled. Like there's like a handwriting name, and then sometimes they change the family, so they raise it. And so this was the situation when I got there. Myself, I also add some labels when we were starting organizing it. Do you know when the archaeologists or you guys are like repainting your house and then you scratch and then you find, oh, this was the old painting color. I had the same feeling here, like, oh, this was the old label inside. Was the previous one, it's one when you start to change the labels and the drawer labels. Here I took a photo when I finished changing all the labels in the front labels in the drawers. When I finished change everything, I put all the labels together to have like idea of handwritings and types and how was that. As you can see here, like has really small labels, like handwriting labels. There is even that one that you don't know if it's a V or a U, like, actually this is my handwriting, sorry for that. I spent 2 to 3 weeks going to the collection and put specimens from the same family in unit trays, and also pre-organizing it. I also made a list of the list of families that we have in the collection. So I spent 3 weeks pre-organizing the collection, and then we set a day to organize everything. We pull out all the unit trays and specimens, and we alphabetically organize here. Sorry, we alphabetically organize the drawers from A to Z, and then myself, Taylor, and Derek, we kind of like, oh, this is Entomid, let's put in the Entomid box drawer. Later, we need to track everything, and we did it too. So by the end of this day, we spent 3 hours doing that because I spent 3 weeks like pre-organizing it and planning the organization. So, and I keep doing that. Also organized, because the collection was organized taxonomically, and then I organized the drawers alphabetically, the genus and the species. So, and Seiji also helped me with the whole Surfeit collection. We have a really income of specimens from the national park, so we need to reorganize everything. This was the hard part for me, was put labels in the front drawers, because we have lots of unidentified specimens. So we have a really income, and then we need to change the label. So that was hard for me, but we need to have it done, so we did. And now all our labels have head labels, and they have like numbers, they have names of the families. A person who doesn't need to know and use the Arctos or like can go and find the family or the group. I also put labels in the front doors of the cabinets too, that we know which one we work with. So, and then we came out with 2 problems: the undigitized flies and the unidentified flies. So 2 problems, big problems that we have. The undigitized flies, we received, historically, we received 2 important donations batches of specimens. The Sommerman pin collection is built part of a Northern Biting Fly Survey. between this period. We have 15 drawers, and the Kool-Aid Gulmich pin collection with 12 drawers. In total, was like 15,000 specimens that was undigitized. But when I say undigitized, there is lots of levels of like information that we have that specimens. We have coded material for taxonomists. We have books, old books with a code in another room, and we have the specimen in the collection. So this is really, we know after get the course, that's really high risk problem in collection. So this was Derek, we need to fix that. So also we have specimens that have labels like locality labels and collection labels, but the coded material was hard to see that. And 2 years ago, Dr. William, 3 years ago, he passed away, and the material that was from Alaska was donated for us. So we have 1,200 specimens donated. It was undigitized, but was labeled and information about locality, collectors, and everything. And in this material, there is 4 new species of Radionidae. If you work with the radios, look for this material because there are 4 new species to be described that he assigned, like this is a new species. So we applied for the Museum of Alaska Collection Management Fund, and we got $20,000 to digitize our undigitized material. And the process is like first the coded material, and then they label undatabase material to add to our Arctos database. And then labeled in database material, by the end, we have identified material in our database, coded, and we can work on other things. Like, for example, increase our DNA library. We have a really big library. Derek also will talk about that. So far in 4 months, we digitized almost 8,000 specimens, as you can see here, with 2 technicians only working in this thing, in this project. So, and another problem I mentioned was the unidentified specimens. And October 21st, we had 25,000 unidentified specimens. 2 days ago, I went to Alaska, as you see, 3 weeks ago, and I analyzed 25,000 specimens of Diptera because I want to pull out the foreheads that I work with. So I pull out 1,500 foreheads in 2 days from the 25,000 specimens, and I kind of now we have 3 times the size of the forehead collection. So, and Steve Pick, he's a volunteer, and he's been working, identified Diptera for 12 years in the collection. So every week he appear and show up in the lab, get his flies, around 200 flies, 150, and then he goes home, ID everything, and the next week he come back with the flies and get more flies. This is 12 years, like he's been doing that for us. So when you see the top 10 people who ID specimens, you can see like he identified more than 10,000 specimens for us. And for the future perspective, we want to finish database the Diptera specimens and also refine database specimen per hour information. Do you guys know in your lab, if you, I have money to guys database, do you know how many specimens per hour the people who work with you can database? Because then you can, I need this X money because of that. In our lab, we have average of 5 to 30 per hour with the people who work with us. So the median of 12.5 per hour. With these, we will be able to refine these numbers and then be like more accurate next time to ask for funding. Also identify specimens to family level at least, add species identification to make it better our DNA library, and keep publishing papers about the collection-based paper. Yeah, I think you guys understand. So we have a really good track and the Arctos, like what the paper was, the specimens that was used. 2 days ago, this paper was published that I wrote about Chris Thompson contributions to the study of Alaska Diptera too. And thank you. It's so fresh, but I just started a postdoc in a Museum of Comparative Zoology. I forgot to mention that because it's been only 2 months, and I still working in forests from Alaska too. So thank you for University of Alaska Museum of Knot for the Centennial Postdoc Initiative and the Biodiversity Postdoc Fellowship from Harvard that I got now, and for all volunteers, students, researchers, and technicians who identify the detour for us. Thank you. We have a minute for questions.
Specifically, you mentioned Captain Song. We actually have some types of birds. Are you missing any blackfly types?
No, we do have lots of black flies that are undigitized. About types, I don't have memory of seeing types in the material that she donated for us, but I can be wrong, like because the material is being digitized. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Andrew Johnson with the Ecdysis portal. I'll let you do the last part.
Hi, so today I want to talk about the Ecdysis portal, kind of its history, some features it has, and where we see it going. So Ecdysis is a web portal built on the Symbiota software, which is an open source software. You can find it on GitHub and install your own portal online. Currently, about 1,800 biodiversity collections serve data through one of 50 plus Symbiota portals that we're aware of. And so the best known Symbiota portal for insects from our community is probably SCAN, the Symbiota Collections of Arthropods Network. This has been around for what, maybe 2 decades now. And it's been really instrumental in a lot of the thematic collections networks that have happened for the entomological community. And in its current phase, one of its main focuses is to really kind of be an aggregator, to get as many insect records into the portal as possible. And so in 2019, we actually kind of started a parallel or kind of partner portal called Ecdysis. And this portal is designed for live managing data for collections that are specifically looking to use this Symbiota portal to manage their data as their primary home. And so we do have collections from around the world, about 134 collections, which includes almost every single collection that used to be live managed on SCAN has now moved to Ecdysis. And we have a lot of representation from around the US where most of the collections are based. And so if you initiate a collection kind of node, a profile for your collection on the portal, you get access to a whole suite of tools that I'm not really going to talk about, but you're able to add individual and bulk record uploads, clean your data, add taxonomic determinations, georeference it, and publish your data out. What we really want to talk today is to share some features that might be useful to your collections and to your own research that the portal might be able to offer you. So the first is checklists. Checklists, of course, are lists of species names. And so this is a module that is built into the portal. Here's an example of Lepidoptera from the UC Santa Barbara neighborhood, I would say. And on the map, you can kind of see the polygon around where this checklist is built from. And you can see specimen records for the historical Lepidoptera specimens that are part of this. So the powerful part of these checklist modules is that it's actually built on the underlying live data that you're managing in your collection. So if you have undergrads or students or other research projects, they can manage the data in one place while they build a checklist. And of course, specimen data are a major focus of the portal, but we can also add in references for bibliographic references for taxa, such as this checklist for amphibians of Canada and the United States. Again, still linking to live managed data within the portal. But what we think this is really powerful for is for new research. So if you want to do a faunal survey, an inventory project of some sort, this is a list of Coleoptera from the Sandtank Mountains, a small mountain range in Arizona that had no beetle records known from it online. And so we went out and we collected and did some survey work. And so we're able to manage our specimens from our survey project live in the portal while we're generating this checklist. And an important thing here is that all the tools that the portal has are really built around also being able to export your data from the portal. So there's actually an export tool to go straight to the Pensoft ARFA manuscript writing platform. And so you can build your checklist, manage all your data underlying it, and then push it out and actually publish it in a peer-reviewed journal. Checklists also come with a number of other interesting features for multi-entry keys. So you can click the little key icon, activate a key module, and here you see a table coming up of a number of morphological characters as a multi-entry key. You could select characters to narrow down the taxa that you have for perhaps an unknown specimen in your hand. And this is an example, not from the Ecdysis portal, but from the Neon Biorepository portal, a different Symbiota portal. But here's a list of carabid taxa, and here we've toggled the image view, so you can actually view images of the taxa. And as you select certain characters, that's going to narrow down your selection and bring up new characters that have been coded for the taxa that are remaining. So it's a dynamic identification resource that is built in a checklist that you're managing live with the data that, that you're also managing in the same place. So checklists are great, but another thing that is kind of newly developed within the Symbiota platform are data sets, and these are sets of occurrence records. So for instance, you could perform a search, maybe query for some taxonomic or geographic variables, and you could toggle this data set tab, and you could either add it to a data set you've already created or to a brand new data set, add those specimens in, and the data set is just that. It's just a link of specimen records. So now you can continue to live manage your data, apply new taxonomic determinations, and so forth. And when you feel your data set is ready, you could export easily to something like Zenodo. So you could get a DOI'd version of your data deposited there, which can then serve as something like material examined for a research publication. So that's how we did manage about 27,000 occurrence records while we were still doing a lot of identifications to do some checklists of the California Channel Islands. So these are some really powerful kind of research tools. Another thing that we've recently built in are a number of occurrence relationship tools. And so here we can see two records from the New Zealand arthropod collection. And we see that they've chosen a relationship here called shares originating samples. So we have a number of different relationship types stored in a predefined structured vocabulary. And both of these are braconids that have been reared out of the same weevil. And we can see in the rest of the data that the weevil is actually present in a gel capsule underneath one of those wasps. But if that weevil were a pinned specimen, then we could also create these relationships with that. And so this is a way that we can actually semantically link multiple occurrence records to each other within the portals. But we can also create links to external resources. So here's a halictid bee that ecologically occurs with. Maybe we're not quite positive that we want to say it's a host or feeds on, but it at least occurs with this lilac record found on iNaturalist. So we can link records together within the portal. We can link records to external resources. And we can also link records just to taxa if we don't actually have an occurrence record. And so here's a spider from this really cool, really small collection, the Spider Parasite Digital Research Collection. So they are able to identify what this spider was, but obviously it was host to this fungus. And so this record exists for the fungus, but there's not a separate culture or slide mount of that fungus, so we can just link it to the taxonomic name there. So these are just three ways that we can create occurrence relationships, and all of these relationships are parsed, and when you export your data, say to GBIF or elsewhere, these relationships are parsed out and put into the Darwin Core archives and distributed to the other data platforms of your choice. And so for data publishing, we do publish, have a lot of tools to publish to a lot of places. It's very simple to publish to other Symbiota portals, so you can contribute your data to scan, or you could easily put in some sort of taxonomic or geographic filter and say push only your bee data to the bee library. Of course, we also publish to DigBio and to GBIF, and then either directly from Ecdysis or maybe mediated through GBIF, the data, of course, go elsewhere to the Global Biotic Interactions Project, to Bionomia, or you can archive these on Zenodo or other places. So we think data publishing is really important to be able to disseminate and get your data out of the portal. But what we want to talk about last is really about the community that is starting to build within
this portal. So we have a lot of institutional collections, and the portal is there to support institutions. But what we're really happy with is that we're seeing other types of collections joining as well. So these are examples of graduate student collections. So these students are digitizing their material, they're getting it online and published early in their career, and they're able to utilize these tools for their research. Of course, after graduate school, there are also other folks who may or may not be affiliated with an institution, but who have very important research collections. So those can be digitized here. Or perhaps you are affiliated with an institution, but you still have a synoptic or other sort of research collection on the side. And so being able to digitize those resources, even without any funding, you're able to join this portal community and get your data online. And then a third type of kind of non-institutional or maybe institutionally affiliated collection type would be a project-based thing. So if you were working on a funnel survey or you're doing some sort of trapping program, you can manage all the data there as part of your project, utilize all those tools, live in a data standards portal-based portal, and still be able to export your data for analysis and publication. And one really powerful example of this, just want to highlight, this is actually an undergraduate student's collection who took their first entomology class. It's a modest size, 776 specimens digitized, mostly from Arizona so far, but those data are already pushed to GBIF. And there he has something like 6 citations. So before you're getting a peer-reviewed literature out there, you're actually being able to contribute to science and actually gaining citations as you're going with your career. And of course, the other really important thing is that all those specimens are on Bionomia. So now as you're looking for graduate opportunities, you can say, hey, I've actually encountered these insects. I've actually identified and collected them from the field. And so we think that's a really powerful way that, a lot of times students, it takes a long time for us to get things digitized in traditional natural history collection kind of pipelines. So this is a way you can kind of circumvent that and really inject your data into the online ecosystem. We're also supported by the Symbiotic Support Hub, which is an arm of the iDigBio project. And their whole mission is to support symbiotic portals and the collections that use them. So they provide a lot of documentation. There are all sorts of guides and videos and images on how to use all these tools. But they also have a help desk. So the Symbiotic Support Hub has a help desk where you can submit questions, problems. Hey, I can't figure out how to upload my data. Hey, this tool isn't working the way we think it should. Can you do something about that? And you're actually able to get responses from data managers and developers from there. So we're really trying to think about this community, and we're really kind of wondering, what are the next steps? Is there anything that our community needs? Are there things beyond this that we should be thinking about? Are there tools and resources or different parts of our community that we should be serving? Also, we're interested in adding new languages. So far, the portal is fully integrated with English and Spanish, but there's a lot of other languages spoken in the world. And so if you're interested in helping us translate this into other languages to be able to serve other communities, we'd love to talk to you. And also we have a portal campaign coming up in February of 2024, where we'll have a series of office hours and tutorials done over about 4 weeks. And so there'll be a lot of information there on how to use some of these tools, how to get involved, and how to put your data there. And finally, so I'm presenting this on behalf of our newly created steering committee. So we are trying to move towards kind of a community moderated and managed mechanism here. And so many of us are here today, so we're all able to talk to you about this portal. We'd love to hear from you. If you follow that QR code, they'll take you to the portal. You can provide feedback. You can, there are links to join the portal or just to learn more. And with that, if we have any time, I'd be happy to answer questions. Thanks. Derek.
Yeah, I love how, and now, everyone with small collections can get their data online. Do you have a way of protocol or encouragement, how to think about chemical labels, the identifier labels on these stuff? I worry about the horrible situation, someone making like 10,000 collections all online, but none of the stuff that we need.
Yeah, so how do we get catalog numbers or labels onto specimens? So we do have a number of templates that we have online that are kind of pre-formatted, so you can just change the first, they're just Excel spreadsheets, you change the first number and it auto-populates everything. So you could do that. I know, like, Craig's shared some ideas with being able to put barcodes on those. A lot of the ones we give out to these independent researchers, we don't give them the ones with actual QR codes on it. We just give them a catalog number. But absolutely, that's step number one. We tell people, you want to put your data in here, that's great, but you've got to be putting labels on specimens. So we do try to support them in doing that. Yeah. Yeah.
If you see someone who has obviously been a little data kind of problem in there somewhere where some needs to switched around somewhere in the import process, but probably a bulk import or export. Is there a way to blend stuff so that we can like that?
Yeah, so there are a number of ways. So hopefully every time, so questions about if you see some sort of data issue, either you think might be with an upload or something, is there a way to flag that? So yes, there are a number of ways. The contact information of like the collection manager or curator is always displayed on those record pages, so you could shoot an email off. There's actually a way that there's a comments tab. So you can make comments, and then as a collection manager, you'll see that there's a bunch of people have made comments on specific taxa. Obviously, if you think you see something that's larger in scope, it might be better to send an email than try to tag, 500 records or something like that. But yeah, but they're actually, so that's something that like the botanical community, they do a lot. They leave comments on each other and edit each other's data a lot more than we do, but those tools are built in. I think that's the time we have. So thank you.
See if I can talk to you without knocking the podium over this time. Up next, we have Cody Bedke, who will be talking to us about around they go, prototyping a turntable design for use in insect digitization.
Thank you. All right. I'm Cody Bedke. I am the Assistant Collections Manager at the Natural History Museum of Utah. And I'm here today to present kind of a utilization of a very sophisticated piece of technology, the turntable. So, digitization over the last several decades has made great strides in advancing our accessibility of collections, as well as their visibility, which makes the work great to do, great fun, but still really, to pick at the dead horse, time and resource intensive. So at the Natural History Museum of Utah, we are still subject to those same limitations. Currently, we house over 1,000 drawers, and excitedly, this is going to be growing shortly by about 40%, which is also intimidating. We have, unfortunately, to deal with this material, only a dedicated staff of 2. We have a full-time collections manager and a part-time assistant collections manager. So a lot of work to be done, not a lot of people to do it. Just as a brief overview, we began imaging our specimens in roughly 2015, but general digitization work began just shortly before then. So predominantly with transcription of labels. So we have, excuse me, we predominantly focus our digitization projects and the imaging projects in particular with these focus stacked high resolution images. And they're great, but, for a single digitization user, which is often what we have going at a time, 20 to 30 minutes a specimen, if you're lucky, assuming that something hasn't gone wrong. So, anyway, with the projected growth that we are to have, and with this time-intensive process, we needed to come up with a way to kind of easily get our data out. And so we came up with the idea of using a turntable. The idea here is we've created a foam prototype stage And this foam stage is composed of round foams with blocks. We set it up for about 8 specimens roughly of work. I'm going to use the term loosely, medium-sized specimens. Predominantly, we've tested this with Lepidoptera. So, yeah. Okay. All right. To test sort of whether or not this is maybe a quicker method of working with these. With working with the digitization, we set up 2 really sophisticated time trials. We broke it down into 3 different components. That is to remove the labels from the specimen, to the time it took to image the specimen itself, and the time it took to replace it and put it back into its subsequent drawer. The first time trial we did was with a person who was familiar with our digitization techniques, and it averaged out to about 2 minutes a specimen. We then tried it with 2 interns who were completely unfamiliar with our techniques. And while doing so, we had them working concurrently. And so we see that the double time accounted for in the label removal and setup process was because the individual doing that was setting up 2 stages at a time. Some of the resultant images predominantly were Lepidoptera case, and as that's what we're going to be mostly looking at with our growth. Great use. We used gray suede to give it a neutral background, but as you can see, some of these images are from different stages. We also had a chance to not a ton of specimens as of yet, but to do a few of the non-Lepidoptera specimens that were found, such as this Dynastes beetle. These are all composed of single shots. The Lepidoptera image is a single shot image. The Dynastes beetle has about 10 focus stacked images. And then this is one of the smaller moths that we were working with. So kind of a quick, real overview summary of this. Advantages to doing this is it utilized our existing equipment. We didn't have to have new cameras, new setups. We composed it of low-cost materials. So $40 turntable, the foam, suede, most of us are crafty, or with the foam, have it lying around. This allowed us to stage multiple specimens at a time, and this was particularly important for having a single digitization technician. And this gave us a very, very quick reference image. And then what we're doing is we're turning these reference images around and using them to crowdsource. So we're sending them to the digital platform. Disadvantages here are, like many of our digitization technology, it still requires label removal, which if something goes wrong, you have disassociated the specimen from their data. And if you're looking for those really, really high resolution components, for particularly small specimens, this is not a great style. We were capturing specimen and label data together. So that would not give you the resolution you're looking for. Kind of future things that we've been thinking about as to where to go with this is to test this sort of staging process with those focus stacked images, so that we're not building a stage that has just a single purpose, but could be used in our normal processes. And is this something that is a good candidate for being 3D printed, which I imagine very, very simple to do. And with that, are there ways to make it a modular system? Can this be adjusted for different size specimens? So I'd like to thank my co-authors and other support people at the Natural History Museum of Utah. And with that, we'll take any questions.
Yes. How do you stabilize the labels when you have multiple specimens and multiple labels so that, spins too fast or something, you don't get the labels disassociated.
Yeah.
How do you keep them in place?
So right now, what we're using to keep them in place, we haven't, as we've tested it, had an issue with them sliding around too much. That's why we opted to use the suede. That tacky sort of background kind of gives a natural surface resistance. And the turntable is not moving particularly fast. It's on a remote. So just slowly as it adjusts. Yes.
Okay, so
Huh?
after you take your images.
Sure.
Then what are you doing afterwards? 'Cause I noticed you didn't have like QR codes in your images and like
Right.
custom labeled images.
Mhm.
Because if you use a QR code, you can use the software that then relabels your images like in Snap. So that each image then has its QR code, which is your catalog code, and that might save you a little bit of time.
So as far as relabeling, you mean like file naming purposes?
Images, so that you can- that catalog number.
Yeah, as we go along, those are renamed the way we process them. So they're just automatically, we're not bulk renaming things in that particular manner. No, we don't have QR images, but for file naming, we just rename them as we go along. It's maybe a little more tedious process, but it does make sure that things are generally pretty well associated. Awesome. Thank you.
So our next two presenters are both online. Up first, we have Erin Powell with cataloging, imaging, and digitizing the type specimens of the Florida State Collection of Arthropods.
Morning, my name is Erin Powell. I'm a curator of Hemiptera and research scientist at the Florida State Collection of Arthropods, part of the Florida Department of Agriculture. I'm primarily focused on scale insects, mealybugs, and whiteflies. Across the collection, many people have supported this project, but it has largely been headed up by my co-author Oliver Keller, who is at the meeting with you in person today. I'll cover what has been done thus far with the type catalogs for the Florida State Collection of Arthropods, what is currently in progress, and how we're incorporating digitization with taxon works in the collection. The Florida State Collection of Arthropods, located in Gainesville, Florida, is the largest insect collection in the southeastern United States, with over 12 million curated specimens, a figure recently acquired through inventories. The FSCA originally began as the collection of the State Plant Board in 1915 and was recognized as the official state collection in the mid-1960s. A merger with the University of Florida's Agricultural Experiment Station and the Florida Museum of Natural History, combined with many large donations from research associates, led to a boom in growth in the 1960s and onward. Since, the collection has continued to grow steadily in size. The ICCN recommends publishing lists of name-bearing types in a museum or institution's possession or custody. Only in 2000 did species description require naming the type repository. Many authors have included this information throughout history, but many have not. Ensuring researchers know where material is promotes scientific progress. Beyond the obvious benefits of making type catalogs, making the catalogs has been an excellent exercise in organization and has led to the repatriation of several loans taken out by deceased or retired staff members. It has also led to finding out that some types are missing because they were never sent, which allows us to follow up and ensure that we have what we're supposed to have. Unpublished manuscript names have also been sorted out of the type material. There's also been a surprising number of cases where a publication says which institution that the type material was going to, but then the author later backtracked with a letter that says that they want their entire collection donated to X institution and is donating it there. So we're working on sorting out problems like that. But these gray areas of ownership aside, as curators, we're the guardians of the material at this point in time, and keeping the material safe, knowing where the material is so that it's accessible for research is our primary goal. The type catalogs make the community aware of what is currently present at the institution. As part of our efforts to catalog the type specimens of the FSCA, we're also taking digital images of pinned, pointed, and slide-mounted specimens. Having images of specimens available can help us answer quick questions, quickly email pictures to other researchers, and in some cases just completely avoid sending out loans, which reduces the risk to the specimens. Having images also gives us a backup in case types are ever lost during a loan transfer or damaged or destroyed in a natural disaster, for instance. The first type catalog was done in 2020 for 2 suborders of beetles. This catalog included label data for all the type specimens, including primary and secondary type material. Verbatim label data for over 3,500 type specimens across 253 species was reported in this publication. The Prolifica type catalog is in progress, which I will mention later on in the talk. The next catalog, done in our recent initiative to do type catalogs across all of the groups at the FSCA, was the Myriapoda catalog. This was published in May of this year. All the label data was given verbatim for 74 species of millipedes housed in ethanol at FSCA. For this group, we've also started incorporating barcoding specimens with unique identifiers. The next catalog to be done was the scorpion and hanging fly catalog, the Mecoptera, which was published in Zootaxa in September of this year. This catalog gave verbatim label data for 78 type specimens, including the primary and secondary type material. The large majority of these specimens were donated by Bisha and Byers. Dorsal view and label images were provided for the holotype specimens. Lou Soma, who curates our Mecoptera, is currently working on entering this data into TaxonWorks. Last month, we published the Hemiptera catalog in Zootaxa. This catalog provided images of 203 primary type specimens and their labels. All of this data and the images are or will be digitized in TaxonWorks. With the type catalogs, we've included an introduction that covers the history of that part of the collection, including the major contributions to the collections, highlighting those who have contributed type material as research associates or as staff members. Together, just 3 research associates have contributed 74% of the Hemiptera primary type material. Today, we have several very active research associates that make major contributions to the Hemiptera collection, including Doug Miller working on scale insects and mealybugs, Mark Rothschild working on membracids, and Joe Eager contributing to the pentatomids. Dr. Alan Sanborn, Emeritus Professor at Barry University, contributed 40% of our primary types in Hemiptera, all of which are cicadas. Dr. Paul Freytag, a world cicadelid expert and Emeritus Professor at the University of Kentucky, contributed about 21% of the primary types, all cicadelid leafhoppers. Dr. Richard Baranowski, a Professor Emeritus at the University of Florida, contributed about 14% of our primary types, all Lygeid seed bugs. The Diptera catalog is almost complete. Currently, we're sitting at over 200 species for which we have primary type material. Dorsal and lateral photographs and their label photos will be provided for all of the pinned and pointed specimens. Photographs of all slide-mounted specimens have been taken as well. Some of these specimens and their images are already in TaxonWorks. The Research Associate Program was a driving force in attracting dipterists to Gainesville, with the likes of Young, Fairchild, and Snyder making large contributions. The next catalog for which we have a nearly completed draft is the Arachnida catalog, excluding the mites and ticks. A large majority of the Arachnida primary type material is made up of the large, much more pseudoscorpion collection, which includes over 140 holotypes. The next largest contribution to the arachnid types are G.B. Edwards spiders. Most of these are jumping spiders, but he also described and deposited crab spiders. We also house Muma's sulfugids, part of Levi's bolus spiders, among others. The Prolifica catalog is next in line with much of the specimen data already transcribed. Images will still need to be taken for this group. Notable contributions to the FSCA type material include Giesbert's and Wappus's cerambycids, Opitz clarids, Strohecker's endomycids, Woodruff scarabs, Skelly scarabs, and more. Nearly 500 type specimens have already been barcoded for this project. The FSCA is currently working to digitize our holdings, and we have chosen TaxonWorks to do so. This summer, we really picked up the pace, getting our taxonomic hierarchy foundation laid out and getting more curators and staff involved with data entry. In just 3 months, over 6,500 collection objects have been entered individually without any batch uploads utilized yet. We do have data sets to batch upload in the future. Currently, the entered data is strongest among the tree hoppers in the family Membracity. Our research associate, Mark Rothschild, has been our MVP in TaxonWorks. He's single-handedly entered data for 5,518 specimens in just the past 3 months, and he's spent an impressive 260 hours in TaxonWorks. These are largely membracid records, but he's worked on other Hemiptera as well recently. The scale insects are our next most represented group, with over 500 collection objects entered, focusing mostly on type material to start, and these have been entered in the last 3 months by my staff members Trudy Duell and Elise Pounders. Hundreds of scolotine bark beetles have been entered by Andrew Johnson, as well as hundreds of fireflies entered by Oliver Keller. Here are just a few examples of the specimens that have been entered thus far. Here is a soft scale holotype that includes both slide images and the specimen image in the depictions for Phylacrococcus howartoni. Some of the fly types have already been entered along with their images by Oliver Keller, and here's an example of one of those. We're working on getting our research curators on board with using TaxonWorks. Our curator of Coleoptera, Gareth Powell, has provided a couple of in-house training workshops for our staff. In the future, we'd like to utilize Taxon Pages and TaxonWorks API to make publicly accessible outlets for this data. All data will also be pushed to GBIF and other public aggregators when the tools become available to do so. And I'd like to thank Lily Dieter, Gary Steck, and Jonathan Brimmer for their assistance with the type catalog photos, some of which are included in this presentation. I'd also like to thank the numerous staff members that have been involved with the type projects and the TaxonWorks data entry, past and present. Please feel free to reach out to me for PDF copies of any of the type catalogs. You can find me at this email address below, as well as on ResearchGate, and I will now take any questions.
Erin, are you with us? And
Yes, I'm here.
all right, there's some questions, we can repeat them. Yeah. No, you just said, yeah.
So you chose TaxonWorks. Were there any other alternatives that you considered? Why did you choose TaxonWorks?
So the question is, why did you choose TaxonWorks, and were there other alternatives that you considered?
Yeah, so as an institution, we kind of just came to the agreement that we would go with TaxonWorks. So some of the other bee work that's been done at FSCA is using a different platform, but we decided that TaxonWorks fit our needs the best. So
nothing has been done with Hymenoptera yet.
This question is a comment that Hymenoptera seemed to be missing from your presentation. Can you provide an update?
Sure. I imagine that Elijah and his group has probably imaged some of our type specimens of the Hymenoptera already. But yeah, Elijah Talamos will be heading up any type catalogs for Hymenoptera for FSCA. So talk to him.
Great. That's an excellent cue. Thank you for that response, and thanks for being here for questions. I think we will move to our next presentation, which is Nicole Fisher, digitizing the world's largest collection of Australian insects, the Australian National Insect Collection.
Out from a Hello all, and thank you for hosting another Entomological Collections Network meeting. I am presenting from the CSIRO National Research Collections of Australia, where I manage the digitisation projects across all our biological collections. I've been in the area of digitisation for the past 10 years, but previous to that, I worked as a Hymenoptera technician for 10 years. Our research collections are housed within CSIRO, which is Australia's national science agency for the country, and CSIRO manages and maintains 7 collections housing an estimated 15 million specimens. and collectively our collections are called the National Research Collections of Australia. Today I'll be presenting on the digitisation of our insect collection, the world's largest collection of Australian insects, and our insect collection has the acronym of ANIC, or ANIC, and it amounts to an estimated 12 million specimens. Like any insect collection, core digitisation activities occur, such as imaging for publication and keys, the database in the specimens, which is also traditionally typed into databases by staff or volunteers based in a collection. But if we were ever going to have some impact, we need to do more than just the core imaging and databasing activities. So looking at our past decade of digitisation, we have seen quite a few projects around new ways of approaching future technology or methods within ANIC, and some of these efforts have been in the innovative space. Beginning as early as 2011, we first utilised Digivol, the Atlas of Living Australia's volunteer platform, for crowdsourcing data from labels. This specimen digitisation in image capture and crowdsourcing methods has seen an increase in 120,000 records. In 2012, ANIC was one of the first collections worldwide to deliver draw images online, and soon after, others associated with the collection trialled RFID chips in the head of the pin as a way to track specimens in large collections. Other projects have covered imaging for biosecurity and identification applications using AI methods and machine learning to measure specimens and extract the trait information. We have extensive data management activities currently underway to collate specimen metadata, including taxonomy and collection data, into a centralised database. And our database management team is moving 6 collection databases to one CMS. Our chosen CMS is Specify. The ANIC specimen records are migrating and being mapped to Specify now, also bringing in our transcribed records from Digivol and massive amounts of bespoke spreadsheet files collected over the years. And soon all of this will be visible once the data migration is complete later this year. We are in the midst of moving our high-resolution images on the CSIRO Data Access Portal with some type specimen groups available online. So with past and ongoing efforts, we are actively enhancing the accessibility of ANIC specimens, and all of this is intensifying with our upcoming move to our new purpose-built facility early next year. Our new building, which has been designed by us, will lead to better integration between collections and digitisation. Some of these projects have appeared in the ANIC newsletter called Anecdotes, and here is a sample of digitisation stories from past editions. The newsletter can be accessed online by the link shown here on the slide. A dedicated program aimed at digitising all our primary type specimens has been underway for a few years, with the goal of completing it before moving to the new building. This project in particular has the most significant focus in ANIC, with the aim of specimen security enhanced ahead of our collection move. In collaboration, working across the teams of collections, digitisation and molecular genomics, our pipeline covers the steps as shown here on the slide. At the time of specimen imaging, a tissue sample is now also taken, this step being part of an integrated workflow. Often locating, identifying and retrieving type specimens held in large collections can prove so challenging at times. And when starting this project, this step was a huge bottleneck for us. We quickly realised that we needed a dedicated staff member, which we have in place now, called a collection digital curator, and he is assigned to just this task. The digitisation team are called digital curators, and they're trained in collection and digitisation skills, so that way we can achieve a further level of curation initially not expected prior to attempting to digitise the primary type specimens. Another project that has a major focus ahead of our building move is the slide collection. Our workflows and imaging pipelines are planned with collection activities to complement and benefit from this move, and to achieve the curation, moving and the digitisation of what we think is an estimated 280,000 slides. We have 3 teams working towards this: the curation, the relocation and digitisation teams. We are moving from old cabinetry to new cabinetry in preparation for the move while we're in the older annex building. And some of the new cabinetry is sitting right now in the old building. This cabinetry is in the centre of the picture with the blue border around it. It is a double-doored large cabinets that hold around 8,900 slides horizontally on trays. No curatorial system is perfect from every point of view, so we have adopted a range of systems to reflect different researchers, working practices and objectives. For example, the slides of nematodes need to be kept horizontally. The mite and scale insect collections are also kept in flat horizontal trays. The whiteflies, the body midgets and some of our flies are kept in standard slide boxes held vertically, holding the 100 slides. These different storage systems involve considerable rearrangement and curation work when adding new species and new slides. And in contrast, the slides of non-biting midgets, thrips and aphids are all kept vertically and stored like reference cards. In terms of slides per unit volume, this is a highly cost-effective and it also has the advantage that new specimens can be added quickly and taxon header tag labels can be entered to keep organisation and facilitate quick searching. So we had options in the new building with the chosen system, whether we stored them horizontally or vertically for a particular group. In general, it depended on the frequency of use, the current research effort, and the working preferences of the individual research workers. So once I knew how a slide would be stored in the new building, that determined our chosen imaging method. And this is an example where the imaging process has workflows based around the curation and packing of specimens, or the ability to capture images quickly to catalogue and capture specimens before we move. With two different storage methods for slides, this determined our imaging method. This has led us to decide that some microscope slides would be imaged at bulk tray level before the collection move to acquire images of unknown and non-database specimens quicker. We have image soup and bulk samples to see that specimens are discoverable earlier and to open up the access to researchers. So to showcase an example here of where we have established workflow approaches for digitising bulk unknown samples. In this case, increasingly biological collections are being called on to help address critical challenges, such as environmental, climate change, conservation, biodiversity loss, the list goes on. In this time of global change, it is increasingly important to detect and report change at the collecting event rather than delaying until specimens are digitised or later used for research. This bulk collection is of critical point-dried Hymenoptera malaise trap samples held in jewel boxes that was previously unknown in the collection. It would be of no real value if we moved it to the building exactly as it was. So we decided that we would image each box, and with a spreadsheet of data, the bulk images could be delivered to the ALA. We used the location of the jewel box within the cabinet, the drawer, and the box number as the catalogue ID, and we were able to expose the event sampling location information, which is now searchable through the ALA. Collection event samples like this, held at unsorted bulk level, can represent an untapped resource of undiscovered and potentially undescribed taxa. And so by imaging this collection, this can now be accessed online for easier searching. Over the past few years, the digitisation team has produced a huge library of more than 20,000 high-resolution training images for the development and testing of apps, capable of using AI-based image classification to detect pests. Taking images at different angles en masse to produce digital image library sets is very time-consuming, so looking at automation in the future, generating images en masse with less manual handling of each specimen will be an advancement on our current workflows. We utilised our 3D system to generate more 2D images from different angles to increase the accuracy of the apps being able to detect pests. The building of digital libraries for biosecurity applications using machine learning and AI will undoubtedly increase, and I suspect we will continue to get more requests of this in the future. So finding a way to expose and share these images more quickly amongst ourselves will be necessary. When looking at our high throughput digitisation of insects, we utilise crowdsourcing transcription methods within Digivol, where we manually remove the labels from the pins to image. We currently are no longer using Digivol, and instead, to accelerate this digitisation further, we are looking at emerging technologies to assist us in the future with automating the imaging of our extensive collection, where removal of labels can be avoided. Of our 12 million specimens, we have only at this stage about 500,000 database records, so we have quite a way to go here. So next year, once we are in the new building and have access to specimens again, once they're unpacked, we will transition from past practices to trialling a new imaging system called Lightning Bug to automate label transcription and 3D photogrammetry specimen imaging. Lightning Bug is a system currently used in Yale and Harvard in the US, and along with our postdoc that we have here working on feature and metadata extraction, he has developed a prototype platform for us to use to automate the extraction of the label information using AI and ChatGPT. Our challenges will always be around continued investment into digitising the collection. With the vastness of the collection and the diverse nature of specimens, continued curation within the drawers will always be such a need. The more we digitise, the more we need to create more space and to expand. And this is also requiring for us now, and we saw this in our type project, a bigger investment in actual physical unit trays and drawers. When we started to move type specimens out from a large unit tray where they were mixed in with type specimens, they would be moved to a small unit tray. And so, of course, the expansion started happening. As we continue incorporating digitisation as part of our standard practices, we also need continued investment in the actual staff dedicated to the digitisation, the data management protocols and processes, and the skills that they need to do this job effectively. And lastly, what I believe will be the biggest challenge for us in our insect collection is finding material once it is digitised with increasing access. We haven't made the jump to using machine-readable codes and are still in a state of picking up a physical specimen to read the unique database number pinned upside down. To locate a specimen more easily, we are actually attaching a label right now that indicates that the specimen has been imaged. Now, coming here to an end, most importantly, I would like to thank the whole team behind all of this work, all collaborating and working together to mobilise our digitised collection. And lastly, thank you to the organisers behind another ECN meeting and hosting a hybrid one at that. Thank you.
See. Is Nicole with us on Zoom? I'm not sure. I don't think so.
As I imagine the time change is affecting people's attendance for the time difference. I think that concludes our morning session. Thanks for being patient with our schedule. And thanks again, another big round of applause for all of our presenters this morning.